Chapter 1075. Nyetian, you can't kill me. I'm the Destiny Cultivator. I haven't finished my mission. If you kill me, it will be a disaster for the Dragon Rebel clan, said Lin Yi in a trembling voice. He looked terrified. Nyetian looked cold and said, You're the Destiny Cultivator. If you're alive, it will be a disaster for the Dragon Rebel clan. Nyetian didn't believe in prophecies, but he knew that as long as Lin Yi was alive, he would become stronger. And Jianming would be a great threat to him. Therefore, Lin Yi had to die. With a cold voice, Nyetian took a step forward and unleashed his killing intent, filling the entire space with it. Even though he was going to win, Nyetian didn't dare be careless. People like Lin were like a centipede that died but didn't fall down. Even if his blood-red pupils were destroyed, who knew if he still had more terrifying cards up his sleeves? Nyetian, shouted someone at that moment. A silhouette appeared between Nyetian and Lin Yi. It was Lin Feng. You want to save him? Asked Nyetian in an ice-cold tone when he saw Lin Feng. Lin Feng was his friend, but if Lin Feng wanted to save Lin Yi, Nyetian wouldn't agree. Nyetian, I'm willing to die for him, said Lin Feng, suddenly kneeling down. He looked determined. He knew that Lin Yi had made many mistakes and killed many people. He deserved to die. But Lin Yi was Lin Feng's brother after all. They were connected by blood, and nothing could stop them. Last time, Lin Yi could have killed Lin Feng, but he had been merciful. Lin Feng believed that Lin Yi wasn't completely heartless. He still cared about his brother. Lin Feng. Nyetian hadn't thought that Lin Feng would stop him from killing Lin Yi. He was surprised and said, You don't understand who you're trying to save. Nyetian, I don't know why Lin Yi is like this, but I know that he's my brother. I have to save him, said Lin Feng. He looked sad and determined. After hearing what Lin Yi had said in the Devamara Palace, Lin Feng went to find Lu Lingyun and asked him some questions. He and Lin Yi were indeed the two orphans of the Mingjian villa. They were brothers connected by blood. He couldn't watch Lin Yi be killed. Lin Feng, Nyetian's face darkened as he tried to figure out what to do. Nyetian, this time, I'm begging you. You can cripple his pure spirit, but please don't kill him. I can't watch him. Said Lin Feng emotionally. But before he finished talking, he sensed a terrifying strength descend from the sky. It was as if a gigantic invisible hand had grabbed his neck. He couldn't talk anymore. Lin Feng, Nyetian was caught unprepared by the sudden turn of events, and couldn't help but cry out in alarm. He had been thinking about how to make Lin Feng give up. He hadn't thought that Lin Yi would suddenly attack Lin Feng. Lin Feng, shouted an Zichun and the others when they saw Lin Feng being controlled by Lin Yi. Nyetian, let me go. I promise I won't kill him, said Lin Yi coldly. His entire body was filled with the strength of a monstrous blood beast which surrounded Lin Feng. If Lin Yi moved, Lin Feng would be swallowed. You animal. He's your little brother, shouted Nyetian furiously. Lin Yi was insane. He wanted to kill his own little brother. A moment before, Lin Feng had used his own life to beg for mercy for him and had even offered to die for him. That guy had the heart of a wolf and the lungs of a dog. He would do anything to save his own life. So what if he's my little brother? Said Lin Yi coldly while moving backwards. I spared his life once, and now he's using his life to save mine. We're even. What's wrong with that? Said Nyetian in a gloomy way. He was slowly moving forwards. He was ready to use his absolute terror at any moment. His absolute terror could directly attack a cultivator's soul. If Lin Yi was distracted for a short moment, he would be able to kill him and save Lin Feng. Nyetian, you won't be able to do that. However, at that moment, Mr. Jian's voice spread in the air. He then added, He has the pupils of a blood-ferocious beast. He can resist spiritual attacks. The pupils of a blood-ferocious beast? Nyetian was stunned. He then said, Isn't the pupils of a blood-ferocious beast destroyed? The pupils of a blood-ferocious beast are ancient. How could they be destroyed so easily? Replied Mr. Jian in a deep voice. Nyetian was stupefied. He hadn't thought that the pupils of a blood-ferocious beast would be so terrifying. Could it be restored after the pupils were destroyed? Let him go. You won't be able to kill him, said Mr. Jian suddenly. Won't be able to kill him? Nye Tian was stupefied again. He didn't understand what Mr. Jian meant. If Lin Feng hadn't stopped him, he would have already killed Lin Yi. Mr. Jian said that Lin Yi couldn't be killed. This made Nye Tian very confused. His social status is extraordinary. I can't explain it to you right now, but you can't kill him now, said Mr. Jian hesitantly. Nye Tian frowned. Even though Mr. Jian didn't say anything, he still chose to believe in Mr. Jian. Nye Tian, I don't want both sides to be injured. Let me go and I will give an eye Jian Ming to you. What do you think? Said Lin Yi suddenly. Surprisingly, he wanted to negotiate with Nye Tian. At that moment, he was seriously injured. Even if he held Lin Feng hostage, it would be difficult for him to escape. Everybody looked at Nye Tian and waited for his reply. All right, said Nye Tian without thinking too much. He slightly nodded. Mo Rushi and the others were stupefied. They didn't know what was going on with Nye Tian. A moment before, Nye Tian's killing chi was extremely strong, but now he had suddenly calmed down. It was a bit strange. The others didn't say anything. They all believed in Nye Tian. Nye Tian, I believe that you are a man of your word, said Lin Yi when he sensed that Nye Tian's killing chi had disappeared. He frowned and immediately said, Xie Qiong, let him go. Everybody was stupefied. They didn't know who Lin Yi was talking to. Yes, master, said a mournful voice in the air. Then, an even more strange scene appeared. A black light appeared behind Lin Yi. It slowly expanded and condensed into a huge vortex. A very evil energy was released. Suddenly, the surrounding space was filled with a dark and bloody chi. Nye Tian looked at the black vortex and sensed an extremely evil energy. At the same time, there was also the chi of a deployment spell mixed in it. He guessed that it must be some kind of teleportation spell. N.I. Jianming was hidden somewhere by Lin Yi and was directly teleported here. If Lin Yi didn't release N.I. Jianming, it would be very difficult for Nye Tian and the others to find him. Chapter 1076. A figure appeared in the black vortex. It was N.I. Jianming. Jianming. N.I. Zi-Chun saw N.I. Jianming and stepped forward to hug him. Sister. N.I. Jianming was very weak. He looked at N.I. Zi-Chun and shouted with difficulty. Then he fainted. Nye Tian sensed N.I. Jianming's chi. After confirming that the latter was fine and that there was no other power in his body, he heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that Lin Yi hadn't attacked N.I. Jianming yet. Nye Tian, I released him. I'm leaving now. At that moment, Lin Yi said in a deep voice. His pitch-black pupils seemed to be flickering. Nye Tian was shocked. He clearly saw two small blood balls appear in Lin Yi's eye sockets. They looked like new eyeballs. Lin Yi said, while retreating, taking Lin Feng with him. Mo Rushi and the others wanted to chase after them, but they were stopped by Nye Tian. The latter said in a deep voice, let him go. This. Mo Rushi didn't understand why Nye Tian would be so soft-hearted at this moment. She still remembered that when she and Nye Tian were in Mo Yang City, he taught her to be cruel. Why did he become so soft-hearted now? Nye Tian just glanced at Mo Rushi and didn't explain much. Under everyone's gaze, Lin Yi took Lin Feng and left. Their silhouettes quickly disappeared. Nye Tian, that blood beast is gone. At that moment, Cher suddenly said, Blood beast. Nye Tian was stunned. It was very strange. Why did Cher know about blood beasts? Why did she say that Lin Yi was a blood beast? Cher, what are you talking about? Who is the blood beast? Mo Rushi frowned. Her beautiful eyes flashed, and she suddenly asked, He's the one who took Lin Feng away. He's Shui Yao, said Shui Er, while looking at Mo Rushi in a serious way. Nye Tian narrowed his eyes. He had a feeling that Lin Yi's identity was not that simple. Let's leave first. Nye Tian did not waste any time. He wanted to find a place to check on N.I. Jianming's condition. Lin Feng had been taken away by Lin Yi, but after all, they were brothers. Lin Yi hadn't killed him. Mr. Nye Tian. Just when Nye Tian's group was about to leave, a sweet voice rang out. After that, Tian Chi-Chi's figure appeared. Behind her stood a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man was none other than her father, the owner of the Nine Cold auction house, Tian Liang. We need a quiet place. Nie Tian looked at Tian Chi-Chi and did not beat around the bush. How could Nie Tian not understand Tian Chi-Chi's intention when she came over at this time? She was obviously trying to rope him in. The strength that Nie Tian displayed just now was too strong, far exceeding Tian Liang and Tian Chi-Chi's expectations. If they could become friends with such an expert, it would be a great opportunity for the Tian family and the Nine Cold auction house. Even Tian Chi-Chi was calculating in her heart whether she could use Nie Tian's strength to make the Tian family a clan that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Shao family. Nie Tian knew what the father and daughter of the Tian family were thinking. Of course, he would not be polite to them. Besides, the more impolite he was, the happier the father and daughter of the Tian family would be. Of course, Mr. Nie Tian, please come with me. Tian Chi-Chi was extremely happy. She smiled sweetly and left with Nie Tian and the others. On the other side, when the head of the Shao family, Shao Lingyuan, saw Nie Tian and the others leave with the people of the Tian family, his eyes were filled with intense anger. He suppressed the annoyance in his heart, and his chest was heaving up and down. The people of the Tian family dared to rope in strong cultivators in front of him. This was simply a naked challenge to the authority of the Shao family. After a short while, Nie Tian and the others appeared in the Tian family's residence. Tian Chi-Chi had arranged a very good residence for them. Nie Tian, is jamming okay? In the room, Ni Zichun saw that Nie Tian had already checked Ni Jiaming's body. He immediately stepped forward and asked nervously, "He's fine, but he's too weak." Nie Tian nodded slightly, then took out a few elixirs and said, "When he wakes up, give him these elixirs. He'll be fine in a few days." "Thank you." Ni Zichun took the elixirs and thanked him deeply. Nie Tian nodded and did not stay any longer. He immediately returned to his room. "Sword Elder, who is Lin Yi?" Back in the room, Nie Tian was already impatient and asked anxiously. Previously, he had the opportunity to kill Lin Yi, but he was stopped by the Sword Elder. However, the latter did not explain too much, which made him very puzzled. "Lin Yi." The Sword Elder said the name in a deep voice. His expression was dignified and even a little nervous. After hesitating for a long time, he said, "He is the same as Ni Jiaming." "The same as Ni Jiaming?" Nie Tian was stunned at first. Then he thought of something. His face changed, and he cried out involuntarily, "He is also a reincarnated person." The biggest secret of Ni Jiaming was that he was the reincarnation of the ancient mystic dragon demon saint. The Sword Elder said that Lin Yi was the same as Ni Jiaming. It was obvious that Lin Yi was also a reincarnated person. How could Nie Tian not be surprised by another reincarnated powerhouse? After being stunned for a few seconds, Nie Tian's expression eased a little. He suppressed the shock in his heart and said, "Sword Elder, who was he in his previous life?" Lin Yi was a reincarnated person. The Sword Elder did not let Nie Tian kill him because his previous life was extraordinary. Blood Demon King. The Sword Elder was silent for a long time and finally said 3 words, word by word. When he said these 3 words, the Sword Elder's expression was full of shock. Blood Demon King. Nie Tian frowned. Although he did not know what the name represented, from the Sword Elder's reaction, it must be a very horrible person. Blood Demon King, the leader of the ancient Blood Demon clan, was one of the 12 top powerhouses of the ancient demon clan. The Sword Elder calmed down a little and started to explain, when the Blood Demon clan was at its peak, it was almost the leader of the 12 demon clans. But later, the Blood Demon clan was destroyed by a bigger force. Only a few of the Blood Demon clan survived. The Blood Demon King is nowhere to be found. Hearing the Sword Elder's words, Nie Tian was stunned. Then he thought of something and said the force that destroyed the Blood Demon clan was the Dragon Rebel clan. That's right. The Sword Elder let out a long sigh and nodded heavily. He said, "It is said that the heavenly secret prophecy of the Dragon Rebel clan was born when the Blood Demon clan was destroyed." Nie Tian was stunned. He recalled the past information in his mind. He once heard from the Dragon Rebel clan's Grand Elder that the Dragon Rebel clan did not only destroy the Divine Dragon clan, but also almost all the other clans. It seemed that the Blood Demon clan was one of the clans that were destroyed. The Blood Demon clan was destroyed. The heavenly secret prophecy appeared in the Dragon Rebel clan. Hundreds of thousands of years later, the leader of the Blood Demon clan was reincarnated and became the destined one in the heavenly secret prophecy. He had to admit that the cause and effect cycle was quite ironic. The members of the Dragon Rebel clan would never have thought that the destined one who would destroy the Dragon Rebel clan would be the leader of the Blood Demon clan that they had destroyed. Chapter 1077. In the room, Nietian suddenly wondered if Lin Yi knew that he was the reincarnation of the Blood Demon King. Generally speaking, reincarnated people would not remember their previous identities. Only when their strength kept increasing would their memories of their previous lives slowly awaken. For example, Ni Jamming still did not know that he was the reincarnation of the Black Dragon Demon Saint. Hearing Nietian's question, the Sword Elder could not help but frown. After a long time, he shook his head and said he doesn't know his identity yet. He just thinks that he is born with the Blood Demon pupils, so he can control the Blood Demons and make them bow down to him. Nietian nodded. Lin Yi did not know his real identity, so the situation was not too bad. Sword Elder, why didn't you let me kill Lin Yi just now? At this time, Nietian asked again. Since Lin Yi was the reincarnation of the Blood Demon King and was once one of the 12 peak experts of the ancient demon clan, there was an extremely terrifying power in his body. If this power was awakened, Lin Yi's strength would be unimaginably terrifying. Just now, it was almost the best time to kill Lin Yi, but the Sword Elder did not let Nietian do it. It was very strange. Nietian, I once told you that the Blood Demon clan is born without a physical body and needs to rely on other people's bodies to survive. The Sword Elder frowned and explained in a deep voice, I don't know why. After the Blood Demon King was reincarnated, he directly had a physical body, and it merged perfectly with Lin Yi's body. If you kill Lin Yi, you will only destroy the Blood Demon King's physical body. You won't be able to kill the Blood Demon King at all. Instead, you will release the terrifying power of the Blood Demon in Lin Yi's body. If that's the case, it will be a disaster for the entire Nine Cold region and even the entire Heaven realm. I see. Nietian's eyes suddenly trembled. He still had a lingering fear, and sweat oozed out of his forehead. Fortunately, the Sword Elder stopped him in time. Otherwise, if he destroyed Lin Yi's physical body and released the power of the Blood Demon King, it would be really terrible. The Blood Demon King was an ancient expert. The terrifying power in his body was unimaginable. After a while, Nietian frowned and said, Does that mean I'll never be able to kill Lin Yi unless I can reach the God Realm? Not necessarily. The Sword Elder faintly said, the corner of his mouth raised into a smile. He said, The Blood Demon has a natural nemesis. If you want to reach the strength of the Blood Demon King, I don't know how long it will take. If you really want to kill Lin Yi, you have to wait for him to grow up. Ooh, Nietian was taken aback. He did not know who had the ability to kill the Blood Demon King. That person is right beside you. The Sword Elder did not say it directly, but sighed. By my side? Nietian was stunned again. He suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, You mean Cher? Cher. That's right. Nietian's first reaction was Cher. Just now, Cher directly said that Lin Yi was a blood demon, as if she already knew Lin Yi's true identity. Yes. Seeing that Nietian had already guessed it, the Sword Elder said, If you want to kill Lin Yi, Cher will be the key. You have to let her grow up. Nietian frowned. The Sword Elder always told him half of the story and not the whole story. He really wanted to know what was Cher's identity. However, the Sword Elder had always been secretive about Cher's identity. He did not even dare to mention it. The Sword Elder dared to mention people like the Xianlong Demon Saint and the Blood Demon King, but he did not dare to say the identity of Cher. This was puzzling. Could it be that Cher's identity was more terrifying than the Xianlong Demon Saint and the Blood Demon King? Nietian could not understand it at the moment, so he simply stopped thinking about it. Since the Sword Elder did not say it, he could not force the latter to say it. Sword Elder, You said that if Cher grows up, how does she grow up? After thinking for a moment, Tian asked with a puzzled look. He had already sensed that Cher's body was completely different from an ordinary martial artist's body. Cher's body did not seem to have any yuan meridians. She did not even have any meridians. It was a very strange body. This was similar to the legendary innate broken meridians body, but it was even more strange and difficult to deal with. Cher is different from ordinary people. Her body does not have yuan meridians. The Sword Elder sighed. His expression became solemn as he said, "So, you need to create yuan meridians for her." Create yuan meridians? Tian's throat moved, and he was stunned. If the Sword Elder did not have a serious expression, he would definitely think that the former was joking. Tian had only heard of awakening yuan meridians, but he had never heard of creating yuan meridians. This was simply impossible. Yuan meridians were innate. How could it be created after birth? Tian, I am not joking with you. If you want Cher to become a martial artist, you must create yuan meridians for her, the Sword Elder said seriously. Tian's expression stiffened. He finally calmed down and said, "Sword Elder, what do I need to do?" Since the Sword Elder said to create yuan meridians, he must know how to do it. Creating yuan meridians, Tian did not even dare to think about it. How could he know how to do it? First, you need to find something that can replace yuan meridians. The Sword Elder's face was solemn as he said, "After that, you need to find something that can replace yuan meridians and fuse it with Cher's body. As long as you find these two things, creating yuan meridians for Cher will be half done." Tian's eyes shone, revealing a touch of passion as he said, "Where can I find these two things?" He had never heard of anything that could replace yuan meridians. 3 lives grass. The Sword Elder's eyes trembled as he said these 3 words. 3 lives grass. When Tian heard this name, he could not help but let out a strange cry. 3 lives grass was only a 3rd-rank medicinal herb. Its healing effects were not bad, but to say that this thing could replace yuan meridians, even if you beat him to death, Tian would not believe it. A mere 3rd-rank medicinal herb could actually replace yuan meridians. Wasn't this a joke? However, in the next moment, Tian's eyes suddenly became sluggish and his expression became stiff. He suddenly remembered what happened in Holy Light City half a month ago. When Cher saw 3 lives grass, she insisted on buying it. Tian still remembered Cher's expression. He had never seen Cher like that before. Could it be that 3 lives grass can really replace yuan meridians? Tian was stunned as he opened his mouth. His eyes were somewhat dull. The Sword Elder nodded his head and said, "Of course, ordinary 3 lives grass cannot. To be able to replace yuan meridians, it must be a 3 lives grass that has survived for more than 10,000 years. More than 10,000 years? Tian was inexplicably stunned. Then, with an embarrassed expression, he laughed and said, "Sword Elder, 3 lives grass can only survive for 30 years. After 30 years, it will automatically wither. How could there be a 3 lives grass that has survived for more than 10,000 years?" 3 lives grass was a very common medicinal herb. As an alchemist, Tian was very familiar with this kind of medicinal herb. A 3 lives grass that could survive for 50 years was very rare. It was impossible to have a 3 lives grass that had survived for more than 10,000 years. Tian, 3 lives grass has another name. You should know what it is, right? The Sword Elder did not answer Tian's question. Instead, he asked a question. Chapter 1078. Tian suddenly remembered that the 3 lives grass had another name, 9 lives demon cat. His eyes couldn't help but become sluggish. His expression stiffened for a few seconds before returning to normal. 9 lives demon cat. This name was something that Tian had seen in an ancient book that recorded medicinal ingredients. At that time, he was very curious as to why the 3 lives grass had such a name. Sword Elder, is there really a 10,000-year 3 lives grass? After calming down a bit, Tian's eyes flashed as he asked, "Of course there is." The Sword Elder faintly smiled. His expression had already calmed down, and he said, The reason why the 3 lives grass is called 9 lives demon cat is because of its strong vitality. Just like a demon cat with 9 lives, it is very difficult to die. Hearing the Sword Elder's words, Nyetian frowned with a face full of doubt. He was not unfamiliar with the 3 lives grass. It was only a very ordinary 3rd-rank medicinal ingredient, and it was not as terrifying as the Sword Elder said. The Sword Elder saw that Nyetian did not believe him, but he laughed and said, "The 3 lives grass is a variant of the ancient Manjusaka. Its strong vitality can only be displayed in the cruelest of environments. The current 3 lives grass, because its living environment is too comfortable, has become weaker and weaker. Finally, it has become a common 3rd-rank medicinal ingredient." Nyetian was surprised. He did not think that the 3 lives grass would have such an origin. It was actually a variant of the ancient Manjusaka. Perhaps in the ancient times, the 3 lives grass had a strong vitality and could live for 10,000 years. Unfortunately, its living environment changed, and its vitality withered from generation to generation. Finally, it became a 3rd-rank medicinal ingredient. The evolution of the 3 lives grass's vitality was in accordance with the saying, "Born in hardship, died in ease." Sword Elder, according to what you said, only the 3 lives grass from the ancient times can live for more than 10,000 years. Where can I find such a 3 lives grass? After a moment, Nyetian became cold and said with a face full of worry, "That is your problem. Perhaps in some extreme environments, the 3 lives grass from the ancient times still exists." The Sword Elder faintly smiled. Then his figure flashed and he went to rest. Nyetian's face was filled with helplessness. It seemed that finding the 3 lives grass was not an easy task. He didn't have any clues, so he could only put this matter in his heart for now. In the future, if he went to a new environment, he could ask more. However, Nyetian still didn't understand why the Sword Elder said that Cher was the key to killing Lin Yi. Could it be that Cher had some kind of power that specifically restrained the power of the blood demon? Unable to figure it out, Nyetian stopped thinking about it. A short while later, he arrived at a small courtyard, where Mo Rushi and Schwer were chatting about something, and they seemed to be very happy. When Mo Rushi and Cher were together, the sage imprint in her body was suppressed. This was a pleasant surprise, and from the looks of it, Mo Rushi quite liked to stay with Cher. Nyetian, seeing that Nyetian had arrived, the 2 girls stood up at the same time and smiled in unison. Suddenly, their spring radiance was so radiant that all the flowers paled in comparison. Both girls were devastatingly beautiful, and when they stood together, they set off each other. This kind of beautiful scene was simply a dream. Nyetian was stunned for a moment before he reacted. His face was slightly embarrassed as he smiled and said, "Are you all right?" "We are fine." Cher ran over and intimately hugged Nyetian's arm. Her clear eyes looked at Mo Rushi and happily said, "Sister Rushi said she would teach me cultivation." "Cultivation?" Nyetian suddenly froze, his face stiffened. "Nyetian, are you all right?" Mo Rushi saw that Nyetian's reaction was not right. So she explained, "Cher's strength is too weak. I want her to cultivate, but her Yuan meridian seems to be a bit special. I can't sense it." Nyetian's face darkened. Of course, Mo Rushi couldn't sense it. Even Nyetian couldn't sense it, because Cher didn't have Yuan meridian, not even normal meridians. "Nyetian, can you help Cher check her Yuan meridian?" Mo Rushi didn't know much about Cher's condition. She came in front of Nyetian and asked with a passionate gaze. Nyetian was slightly stunned and didn't know what to say. Cher and Mo Rushi were very excited, especially Cher. She was so happy that she almost jumped up. Nyetian really didn't have the heart to hurt her. However, Cher's condition was very special. She didn't have Yuan meridian in her body, and she had to create Yuan meridian in order to step on the path of martial arts. Nyetian Cher, Mo Rushi was a meticulous person. When she saw Nyetian's expression, her eyes flickered and her face was filled with worry. Cher is fine, but I feel that her personality is too gentle. She's not suitable to walk the path of martial arts. She's more suitable to be an alchemist. Let her identify the herbs first. Nyetian thought for a moment and said with a smile. Mo Rushi pursed her lips. She knew that Nyetian must have something that he didn't say, but she didn't ask. She said to Cher, Cher, you're not suitable for fighting and killing. It's better for you to be an alchemist. Cher held the phantom snow fox in her arms and nodded her head. She was still very happy and said, whatever Big Sister Rushi tells Cher to do, Cher will do. Mo Rushi smiled and nodded, but there was a trace of worry in her eyes. Aya. Right at this moment, Cher suddenly screamed and said nervously, Momo is awake. I'm going to see him. After that, Cher ran towards the room with the phantom snow fox in her arms. Momo? Nyetian looked at Cher and was surprised. Did Cher have a pet again? Mo Rushi saw the strange look on Nyetian's face and couldn't help but laugh. She explained, Momo is the 3 lives grass. Cher just coaxed Momo to sleep, and now Momo is awake again. Nyetian was speechless. The 3 lives grass was a medicinal herb, but Cher actually gave it a name. She even coaxed it to sleep and then said that it was awake. What was going on? Nyetian was very knowledgeable about medicinal herbs, but he had never heard of a medicinal herb that could be used to sleep. However, from the looks of it, Snow seemed to be quite interested in the 3 lives grass. He had to admit that this 3 lives grass was really lucky. It had a master like Cher, and she even coaxed it to sleep. Even Nyetian didn't have this kind of treatment. Mo Rushi also felt that Cher's mind seemed to be different from others. It seemed that she could really understand the language of spiritual beasts and spiritual herbs. She even saw with her own eyes that Cher made the 3 lives grass do strange movements. At that time, she thought that her eyes were playing tricks on her. Nyetian, is there something wrong with Cher's Yuan Meridian? Mo Rushi didn't tell Nyetian about it, but stepped forward and asked. She could tell that Nyetian must have something that he didn't say. Cher's Yuan Meridian is a little special, and she can't cultivate for now. But don't worry, I'll help her solve it. Nyetian smiled faintly, and a strong confidence appeared on his face. Saying that, Nyetian held Mo Rushi in his arms. Speaking of which, they hadn't been alone together for a long time. Nyetian, right at that moment, an extremely untimely voice sounded, and then a figure appeared in a hurry. It was Lin Feng. Chapter 1079. Nyetian wasn't nervous when he saw Lin Feng. He let go of Mo Rushi and smiled indifferently. You're back. Nyetian wasn't surprised that Lin Feng had suddenly appeared. He had taken Lin Feng away because they were brothers. No matter how cruel Lin was, he wouldn't kill Lin Feng for no reason. Nyetian, today Lin Feng pulled a long face. He had come to apologize to Nyetian. If he hadn't shown up, he would have been killed by Nyetian. Nyetian, however, smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Fortunately, Lin Feng had stopped him. Otherwise, the situation would have been terrible. Nyetian told me to tell you something. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. At that moment, Lin Feng's eyes twinkled and he said, he went to the godly area in the heaven world. He said he would wait for you there. Sure, Nyetian said with a smile, his face expressionless. Nyetian, he didn't die this time. He must hate you. If you really want to go to the godly area in the heaven world, you must be careful. Lin Feng said when he saw that Nyetian didn't care at all. He won't give up easily. He will definitely get his revenge. Nyetian nodded, his expression growing slightly serious. He knew that after He saw how powerful the hidden dragon royal bloodline was, he would want it even more. Coincidentally, Nyetian also wanted the hidden dragon royal bloodline. There would definitely be a battle to the death between the two. Nyetian guessed that He was in a hurry to go to the godly area in the heaven world because he wanted to increase his strength as soon as possible. He didn't want to lose to Nyetian again. After Lin Feng left, Nyetian and Mo Rushi talked for a while and then left. Because Cher was always there, it was inconvenient to do some things, so he could only endure. The next morning, Nyetian walked out of his room, his entire person brimming with health and vigor. The injuries left behind in yesterday's battle were completely recovered. Tian felt that his strength had increased somewhat, but wanting to advance to the second-level Heavenly Emperor seemed to be still too early. Lord Tian, my master wants you to go to the auction house. At this moment, a person who looked like a servant appeared. His face was filled with panic, as if something big had happened. Tian went blank for a moment before asking, "Did something happen?" "I don't know. It seems to be related to the Shao family," the servant said and urged Tian to hurry over. Tian nodded his head. With a stomp of his feet, his figure directly soared into the sky and turned into a stream of light in the sky. Since the matter was related to the Shao family, it must be urgent. Therefore, Tian did not greet Mo Rushi and the others and directly went over. The Nine-Cold auction house wasn't far from the Sweet Manor. Tian's figure flickered a few times and arrived above the auction house in the blink of an eye. It's indeed the Shao family. Tian's gaze turned intent and saw a large number of black-clothed martial artists gathered in the plaza in front of the auction house. Each and every one of their auras was very strong. They were actually all around the 9th level heaven being realm. The Shao family is indeed very powerful. Tian was slightly surprised in his heart. There were more than 109th level heaven being martial artists present. The strength of the Shao family's foundation made people have a whole new level of respect. So many 9th level heaven being martial artists were sufficient to deal with the entire Meru world. However, the 9 cold region's martial artists all looked down on the Meru world's people, just like how the Meru world's people looked down on the 3,000 small worlds. The 9 cold region's cultivation environment was far better than the Meru world's. The people here rarely entered the Meru world. They also did not allow the Meru world's people to enter the 9 cold region. The Shao family's first elder died at Lin Yi's hands inexplicably. The Shao family would not find Lin Yi to take revenge. They could only find the 9 cold auction house to take revenge. However, Tian did not expect the Shao family's people to be so arrogant. They directly brought so many martial artists and barged into the auction house. On the plaza, Tian Liang's face darkened. He looked at Shao Lingyuan cold and said, "Shao family head, you brought so many people to my auction house. What is the meaning of this?" Tian Liang. The corner of Shao Lingyuan's mouth twitched. A cold light flickered in his eyes. He called Tian Liang by her name and said coldly, "My Shao family's first elder died at the 9 cold auction house. Shao Feng, a direct descendant of the Shao family, also died at the auction house. Don't you owe me an explanation?" Explanation? Before Tian Liang could speak, Tian Chi-Chi, who was behind him, stepped forward angrily and said sternly, "Shao Feng died at the hands of the Shao family's first elder, and the Shao family's first elder died at the hands of Lin Yi. Your Shao family did not seek revenge from Lin Yi, but sought trouble with our auction house. What is the meaning of this? Are you taking advantage of your power to bully others?" Tian Chi-Chi's words attracted a lot of discussion from the surrounding crowd. Yeah, the Shao family has gone too far. Shao Feng and Shao Lingen's deaths had nothing to do with the auction house, but the Shao family wants to settle the score with the auction house. This is bullying. The Shao family is very powerful. Don't they always bully others? What's so strange about that? The auction house is really unlucky this time. The Shao family has something on them. They're probably going to vomit blood this time. The Shao family controlled the entire 9 cold region, but there were a few other major forces. Even though they were not as powerful as the Shao family, they still had a certain amount of prestige and strength. The Tian family of the auction house was one of these major forces. In recent years, their momentum had been very strong, and they were faintly competing with the Shao family. The Shao family attacking the Tian family at this time was obviously to suppress the latter. What's wrong with bullying others? Shao Lingyuan heard the discussion of the people around him. He roared angrily and shouted, "Our Shao family wants to take advantage of our power to bully others. Do you have any objections?" As soon as he said that, the onlookers trembled in fear. No one dared to make sound. The Shao family represented absolute power in the 9 cold region. The Shao family was the biggest rule in the 9 cold region. No one dared to disobey them. Tian Liang, I'll tell you directly. Today, I'm going to make your auction house bleed. Xiao Lingyuan was extremely insolent. He didn't avoid the taboo and directly shouted, "You actually dare to rope in that silver-haired martial artist in front of me? If I don't knock you down a peg, you'll be riding on my Xiao family's neck and taking a shit." As expected, Xiao Lingyuan was furious because Tian Liang tried to rope in Tian yesterday. At this time, Xiao Lingyun already knew that everything happened because of Tian. Xiao Feng was held hostage by Tian, and Xiao Linghan was induced by Tian to attack Lin Yi, which resulted in him being killed by Lin Yi. If it wasn't for Tian, Xiao Feng and Xiao Linghan wouldn't have died. So today, he not only came for the Xiao family's auction house, but also for Tian. Today, I'm going to let everyone know who the real ruler of the Nine Cold region is. The more Xiao Lingyuan spoke, the more arrogant he became. He shouted at the onlookers and even released a huge oppressive aura to intimidate them. This was the insolence of a Xiao family. As the ruler of a Nine Cold region, they wouldn't allow anyone to provoke them. "Xiao Lingyuan, you're going too far." Tian Liang couldn't take it anymore. He shouted and shouted Xiao Lingyuan's name. Since Xiao Lingyuan was bullying people so openly, if he continued to tolerate it, he would be too useless. Actually, the Xiao family exploited other forces greatly. Take the Nine Cold auction house, for example. 30% of the profits every year went to the Xiao family. It was completely free. Tian Liang had tolerated the Xiao family for a long time. This time, he decided not to tolerate it anymore. Chapter 1080. Above the spacious plaza, as Tian Liang's attitude became unyielding, the atmosphere of the entire plaza immediately became tense. "They're going to fight." The crowd's gazes trembled. Everyone could smell the thick smell of gunpowder. The Xiao family martial artists and the auction venue's people all became nervous. A moment of carelessness, and it would be a bloody battle. "Tian Liang, looks like you want to fight with my Xiao family." Xiao Lingyuan smiled coldly, a sharp cold light surging in his eyes. What he wanted was to infuriate Tian Liang. As long as the auction venue's people dared to make a move against the Xiao family, there would only be one outcome: death. Tian Liang felt the killing intent from Xiao Lingyuan's entire body, and his brows furrowed suddenly. He instantly understood that the latter wanted to infuriate him and force him to make a move. "Xiao family head, what do you want?" Tian Liang suppressed the anger in his heart and said solemnly. Although he did not fear Xiao Lingyuan, the Xiao family still had several ancestor-level figures. It was rumored that they were all third-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Any one of them was sufficient to exterminate the auction venue. The reason why the Xiao family could dominate the Nine Cold region was that the family's foundation was deep, with ancestor-level figures holding down the fort. If not for these ancestors, the Xiao family would not be much different from the other factions. "What? Want to negotiate terms with this family head again?" Xiao Lingyuan's sinister gaze swept over Tian Liang, his face full of disdain, insolent to the extreme. Tian Liang clenched his fists tightly, suppressing the rage in his heart. His body could not help but tremble slightly as he said solemnly, "Xiao family head, state your terms." Tian Liang knew that he could not avoid today's matter. Might as well be straightforward and save trouble. At this moment, Tian Chi-Chi was constantly looking around as if she was waiting for someone to arrive. But Tian Liang shook his head slightly. He knew that Tian Chi-Chi was waiting for Tian. But what could Tian do even if he came? He roped in Tian indeed had the intention of contending against the Xiao family. But he did not expect that Xiao Lingyuan was actually arrogant to this extent, directly bringing a large number of Xiao family martial artists over and surrounding the auction venue. Even if Tian came at this time, could it be that the auction venue dared to start a war with the Xiao family? Xiao Lingyuan and the others weren't scary. What was scary was the old ancestor of the Xiao family. If the old ancestor of the Xiao family was angered, the auction house would be completely destroyed. Therefore, Tian Liang's current plan was to swallow this anger and discuss it later. "Tian Liang, this patriarch's conditions are very simple." Xiao Lingyuan smiled coldly. His eyes were full of disdain and mockery. He said loudly, "From now on, The Jiuyang auction house belongs to the Shao family. Tianjia, get out of Jiuyang City and never set foot in the Jiuyang region again. As the cold voice fell, it was like a clap of thunder that resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone's faces turned sluggish, and they couldn't believe their ears at all. Who would have thought that Shaoling Yuan's conditions would be so harsh? This was completely forcing Tianjia onto the road to death. Everyone turned to look at Tian Liang, waiting to see how she would react. Shaoling Yuan, you've gone too far. Tian Liang's fists were clenched so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. His entire body's violent rage suddenly erupted as he roared furiously. At this time, he finally understood that Shaoling Yuan didn't bring so many people to the auction house to discuss conditions with him at all. The Shao family had already made up their minds to exterminate Tianjia and the auction house. Gone too far, Shaoling Yuan raised his eyebrows. His attitude was extremely arrogant. He smiled coldly and said, Tian Liang, it was you who asked me to state the conditions. Now that I've mentioned them, you're unwilling. It seems that you really want to start a war with the Shao family. Since that's the case, let's fight. As the last two words fell, Shaoling Yuan's entire body rose up with a frightening aura. Cold killing intent was released and directly enveloped Tian Liang. He didn't come here today to discuss conditions with Tian Liang. He came to kill. Kill. The next moment, all the warriors of the Shao family released their powerful aura and roared in unison. The violent killing intent condensed into a substance, like an invisible giant hand, pressing down on the warriors of the auction house. Everyone in the auction house felt the enormous pressure. Suddenly, their chests sank, and many people vomited blood on the spot. The Shao family had more than 100 warriors of the 9th level of the Heaven Being realm. Their aura merged into one. The degree of terror could be imagined. Tian Chi-Chi's face turned red. Finally, she couldn't bear the pressure anymore. Her body trembled, and she vomited a mouthful of blood. She took a few steps back and almost fell. Chi-Chi! Tian Liang cried out in alarm. In a flash, he rushed forward to support Tian Chi-Chi. Go to hell. Just then, killing intent flashed in Shaoling Yuan's eyes. With a roar, he directly slammed his palm. The violent palm force pressed down, and the terrifying aura bloomed, covering Tian Liang. Seeing this scene, the crowd's eyes suddenly trembled. No one expected that the dignified Shao family head would sneak and attack. Tian Liang felt a huge force coming toward him. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. If this palm strike landed on him, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. You're courting death. At the moment of imminent peril, an ice-cold voice rang out. After that, an extremely sharp sword shadow slashed down, bringing with it a terrifying killing intent. Shaoling Yuan was stunned. He looked up and saw the sword shadow falling. The great fear in his eyes instantly turned into despair. Rumble. In the next instant, the horrifying sword shadow directly fell. Not only did it block the terrifying palm for Tian Liang, it even directly landed on Shaoling Yuan's body. Shaoling Yuan's eyes suddenly widened. His mouth opened very wide, but he could not emit any sound. The instant the horrifying sword intent bloomed, Shaoling Yuan's body was directly drowned in the sword intent. He did not even have time to let out a scream on his deathbed. The crowd's gazes suddenly turned sluggish, fixed on that figure in the void. The wind blew, his silver hair fluttering. It was precisely Nie Tian. Shaoling Yuan never thought that at the same time he sneak attacked Tian Liang, he was actually also sneak attacked by Nie Tian. The dignified Shao family head, a second-level heavenly emperor martial artist, did not even have the chance to cry out in the end and directly died tragically on the spot, making people sigh. This sword, although Nie Tian took the advantage of sneak attacking, his strength was placed there. Even if he did not sneak attack, he could kill Shaoling Yuan too. It was just that he needed to expend some means. The crowd's gazes turned sluggish, looking at Nie Tian dumbfoundedly, unable to react for a long time. The Shao family head was one-shot by someone with one sword. Such a scene was too shocking. Lord Nie Tian, Tian Liang looked at Nie Tian's figure, his expression aghast, still in a state of shock. Fortunately, Nie Tian made a move in time. Otherwise, he would have died tragically under Shaolin Yuan's palm. Tian Chichi looked at Nie Tian with a grateful look. While at this time, those Shao family martial artists were completely stunned, looking at Nie Tian in a daze, slowly becoming alarmed and terrified. Nie Tian's strength was too powerful. It was not what they could contend with at all. Nie Tian stood in the void, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly, but he opened his mouth to a stretch of void and said, "If I didn't guess wrongly, you're the Shao family's old ancestor, right? The Shao family head is already dead. Are you still not coming out?" The crowd was stunned, not knowing who Nie Tian was talking to. Chapter 1081. In the void, a gray-robed figure appeared. The crowd immediately froze, their faces lifeless. No one could have thought that there was actually a person hidden in the void. That gray-robed figure was very old, his face full of wrinkles, his body stooped, like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. But this old man's eyes were very sharp, releasing a blade-like sharp aura. What made people even stranger was that this old man's aura was clearly restrained, but it gave people a mountain-like, oppressive aura. But these were not the most surprising thing. The most shocking thing was that this gray-robed figure was actually a woman. She's the Shao family's old ancestor. At this time, someone recalled Nie Tian's words just now. His gaze trembled, and he cried out in surprise. Who could have thought that the legendary Shao family's old ancestor was actually a female martial artist? But the next instant, those Shao family's martial artists knelt on the ground in unison and shouted loudly with a great commotion. That was right. This old man was none other than precisely the Shao family's old ancestor, Shao Shuanghen. Shao Shuanghen turned around slightly, his gaze sweeping across everyone. A chill immediately welled up in everyone's hearts, as if falling into an ice cellar. Tian Liang and Tian Chichi father and daughter knew that the Shao family's old ancestor appeared. Their eyes involuntarily trembled, filled with terror. Shao Shuanghen's gaze turned around, finally landing on Nie Tian. An aged voice sounded out and said, "Young man, you can actually discover this old body's existence. It truly surprises this old body. Your strength actually reached 3rd level Heavenly Emperor. This also makes me very surprised." Nie Tian responded coolly. Although he said he was surprised verbally, his eyes revealed a heart-palpitating calmness. Nie Tian possessed the eyes of the starry sky and also had the holographic divine vestige. Anyone who was lurking within several hundred meters around him, he could discover them. He sensed Shao Shuanghen's existence right from the start. It was just that he did not say it all along. Even when he made a move against Shao Lingyuan, he was constantly on guard against Shao Shuanghen. Actually, thinking about it, it was also clear that Shao Lingyuan had long witnessed Nie Tian's strength. If there was no one supporting him from behind, how could he dare to come to the auction venue so brazenly? 3rd level Heavenly Emperor. When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, their gazes trembled fiercely. Immediately, countless sounds of gulping sounded out. In the rumors, the Shao family's old ancestors were a group of peak 2nd level Heavenly Emperor old monsters. But now, the one who appeared in front of everyone was a 3rd level Heavenly Emperor, super strong martial artist. How could this not surprise people? Young man, it seems that you have a very strong perception. Shao Shuanghen's old face changed slightly. She had not changed her expression for hundreds of years. Yet Tian smiled faintly and said, "My perception abilities are far above your expectations. There are still 2 3rd level Heavenly Emperor martial artists behind you. If I were to fight with you, they would wait for an opportunity to ambush me. Am I right?" This time, Shao Shuanghen's aged pupils suddenly shrank, and his face revealed a look of horror. He could no longer hide the surprise in his heart. There are 2 more people? When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, they were instantly stunned. They looked at the void in terror, but they could not see or sense anything. Shao Shuanghen's face darkened. His hoarse voice sounded, "You two come out." "Yes, big sister." Immediately, the void swayed slightly. two figures appeared. They were actually female martial artists too. Furthermore, their appearances were very similar to Xiao Shuanghan. Nye Tian's gaze swept across the three people and could not help smiling in his heart. Turns out that the Xiao family's old ancestor is three women. Furthermore, they are triplets. Big sister, this punk killed the Xiao family's disciples. Let us attack together and kill him. A person behind Xiao Shuanghan opened his mouth coldly. His gaze when looking at Nye Tian carried thick killing intent. Tian Liang raised her head and glanced at that person who spoke, bean-sized beads of sweat seeping out of her forehead. If Nye Tian was killed, the entire auction venue would suffer calamity too. Third sister, you step down? Unexpectedly, Xiao Shuanghan opened her mouth coldly and made that person step down. Immediately, Xiao Shuanghan looked at Nye Tian, her gaze sharp, but she did not speak. Clearly, she was judging Nye Tian's strength. Nye Tian stood in the void and did not speak. He waited for Xiao Shuanghan to speak. After a while, Xiao Shuanghan finally opened her mouth and said, "Young man, your martial arts talent is very strong. I have never seen anything like it in my life. I want to just say it." Before Xiao Shuanghan could finish, Nye Tianling interrupted him coldly. The cultivators of the Xiao family looked at Nye Tian angrily. Obviously, they disliked Nye Tian for interrupting the old ancestor of the Xiao family. Xiao Shuanghan smiled lightly. She was not angry at all. She said, "I will make a gentleman's promise to you. You and I will fight. If I win, you hand over the 8 Desolation ghost bone and ask the people of the Zhuliang auction house to leave the Zhuliang region and never come back. If you win, the Xiao family will not pursue what happened before. The people of the Xiao family will also leave the Zhuliang region and never come back. What do you think?" Hearing Xiao Shuanghan's words, everyone present was stunned. No one could have thought that she would actually offer such a good condition. The 3 old ancestors of the Xiao family showed up. They were all 3rd-level Heavenly Emperor strength. No matter what, they could also kill Nye Tian. Why would Xiao Shuanghan need to make this kind of deal with Nye Tian? A gentleman's promise, is it? The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched slightly. A hint of a strange look flashed across in his eyes. Following that, he looked at Tian Liang and said, "Lord Tian Liang, can I make a decision on behalf of the auction house? I'm willing to listen to Lord Nye Tian's arrangements." Tian Liang's expression was ugly as he nodded his head solemnly. Right now, Tian Jia was already riding a tiger and finding it hard to dismount. He could only entrust his hopes on Nye Tian. Tian Liang's heart was very heavy. Even if Nye Tian's opponent was only Xiao Shuanghan alone, he also did not feel that Nye Tian had any chances of winning. After all, Xiao Shuanghan was 3rd-level Heavenly Emperor strength. But Tian Jia already had no way out. He must bet on Nye Tian. Very good. Nye Tian smiled faintly. His gaze flickered a little, and he said to Xiao Shuanghan, "Since Lord Tian Liang agrees, I naturally can't shrink back. This gentleman's promise, I agree to it." "Okay." Xiao Shuanghan nodded his head heavily. Then, his gaze turned to the Xiao family's martial artists and said, "This battle is a fair battle between this old one and this young man. No matter what the outcome is, the Xiao family's people. Enough nonsense, let's begin." At this time, not waiting for Xiao Shuanghan to finish talking, Nye Tian directly interrupted her again, his eyes revealing thick contempt. A cold light flashed in Xiao Shuanghan's eyes, but he suppressed his anger. Following that, he squeezed out a hint of a smile and said, "Since your excellency is so anxious, this old one won't stand on ceremony." The moment the voice faded, Xiao Shuanghan's entire body's aura soared. A withered yellow towering tree actually appeared behind him. It did not have half a leaf, only swaying branches. It was like one sharp claw after another, extending towards the sky as if wanting to tear the sky apart. Following the appearance of that towering tree, a boundless aura spread out. The crowd on the ground felt their chests stifled and immediately retreated one after another. Chapter 1082. Xiao Shuanghan's entire body released his aura, directly using the giant spirit true body. The horrifying aura of the withered giant tree spread above the void. One after another, The branches danced wildly like tentacles, as if wanting to tear the space apart. Giant spirit true body. When the crowd saw this scene, their gazes trembled incessantly, shock in their hearts. Xiao Shuanghen's move was determined to succeed. He must defeat or even kill Nie Tian. It's over. Tian Liang looked at the withered giant tree in the air. His face fell, directly turning deathly pale. Xiao Shuanghen was third-level Heavenly Emperor strength and actually used the giant spirit true body. How could Nie Tian still have any chance? But in the void, Nie Tian's face was as calm as water, without any ripples, calm to the extreme. Young man, reveal your giant spirit true body then. Xiao Shuanghen's murderous eyes stared at Nie Tian and said coldly. But Nie Tian shook his head at this time and said with a smile, "Dealing with you, I still don't need the giant spirit true body." When the crowd heard Nie Tian's words, they were stunned one after another. Their pupils opened wide, stunned until they could not speak. Xiao Shuanghen did not even have the qualifications to let Nie Tian use the giant spirit true body. The latter was also too arrogant. "Stinking brat, you're courting death." This time, Xiao Shuanghen could not tolerate it anymore. With a fierce roar, the aura of her entire body skyrocketed. She was the Xiao family's old ancestor, the true controller of the Nine Cold region. But Nie Tian interrupted her time and time again. Now, he actually started to despise her. If she continued to endure, she would definitely endure until someone died. Withered tree hand. The next instant, Xiao Shuanghen's figure suddenly moved. The withered giant tree behind her swayed violently. The void immediately trembled. The surrounding space within several thousand meters was pulled by a tremendous force, instantly tightening. "Die for me." Xiao Shuanghen put away her pretentious posture. A sharp voice came out. The withered giant tree behind her pressed over with a loud bang. Countless branches intertwined together, condensing into a giant withered tree hand in the air. Boom! The void trembled violently. Immediately, a tremendous force was released, pressing over towards Nie Tian. What a terrifying aura! Seeing this scene, the crowd's eyes trembled violently, and the fear in their hearts was revealed on their faces. At this time, Nie Tian was standing in the sky. He didn't look at Xiao Shuanghen. Instead, he stared at the other two ancestors in the distance. "Go to hell, you stinking brat." Suddenly, two other voices rang out at the same time, superimposed over each other. It was none other than the two patriarchs. The moment their voices fell, the two of them made their moves at the same time. It was the same move as Xiao Shuanghen. The three of them were triplets, and their awakened primordial spirits were the same. Boom! 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 Before the crowd could react, three withered wood hands appeared in the void and pressed down on Nie Tian at the same time. Crack! 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 The moment the three giant hands pressed down, a terrifying aura burst out. The ground thousands of meters below couldn't bear the pressure and cracked. It's over. That silver-haired brat is dead. The crowd's eyes trembled and they cried in their hearts. If Xiao Shuanghen attacked alone, Nie Tian might have a chance to survive. However, with three patriarchs attacking together, Nie Tian would definitely die. Nobody expected that the patriarchs of the Xiao family would break their promise. Nie Tian stood in the air, surrounded by a terrible sword will. His whole body was like a sharp sword that could tear everything apart at any time. Humph! Facing the joint attack of the three patriarchs of the Xiao family, Nie Tian didn't show any fear or surprise. He just whispered, "Is this your gentleman's promise?" Nie Tian didn't take the so-called gentleman's promise seriously from the very beginning. It was just a trick used by Xiao Shuanghen to confuse him. The moment he saw the three sisters of the Xiao family, he knew that they were all cruel and merciless. How could they make a gentleman's promise to him? Especially Xiao Shuanghen, who had been putting on airs all the time. Did she think that Nie Tian was a 3-year-old child? Xiao Shuanghen had been evaluating Nie Tian's strength. She must have thought that his strength was too strange, and she didn't have absolute confidence. That was why she made a gentleman's promise. since he had already seen through Xiao Shuanghan's plot. How could Nie Tian not be prepared? The beast of chaos can't wait any longer. Just as the three giant hands were about to fall, the corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly. Then his body trembled, and a terrible red halo gushed out of his body. Roar! In an instant, a 2,000-meter-long red beast appeared behind him. It let out a furious roar that shook the heavens and the earth. The dazzling red light spread in the void, and the whole sky seemed to be covered with a layer of red curtain. People couldn't look at it directly. The giant red beast was Nie Tian's giant spirit true body, the beast of chaos. Nie Tian hadn't used the giant spirit true body for a long time. When he used it again, his strength had reached the heavenly emperor realm, and he could exert the power of the giant spirit true body. When the crowd saw the giant red beast behind Nie Tian, they were stunned. No words or actions could express the shock in their hearts. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that there was such a terrifying giant spirit true body in the world. When the 2,000-meter-tall behemoth appeared, the entire world seemed to have shrunk. That angry roar seemed to be declaring that it was the absolute ruler of this part of the sky. When Xiao Shuanghan and the others saw Nie Tian suddenly release the giant spirit true body, they were stunned at first, and their hearts trembled for a moment. But then Xiao Shuanghan's mouth curled into a cold smile, and she said in a low voice, "You fool! Don't you think it's too late to use the giant spirit true body now?" Nie Tian's giant spirit true body was indeed very terrifying. Even under the situation where her strength was 2 levels higher than Nie Tian's, Xiao Shuanghan still felt a strong sense of fear, and an uncontrollable fear arose in her heart. But Nie Tian didn't use the giant spirit true body immediately, and he had already lost the initiative to attack. Even if he released it now, he could only endure the pain and be beaten. Xiao Shuanghan didn't care about some ridiculous gentleman's promise. As long as she had the initiative, she would definitely not stop until Nie Tian was completely annihilated. Too late. Nie Tian looked up slightly, and the corners of his mouth twitched as he spat out 2 words in a low voice. At this time, the beast of chaos opened its huge mouth, and a dazzling white ball of light appeared. It was the Starlight Ball. Nie Tian knew about Xiao Shuanghan's plot, so how could he not prepare some tricks? 9th-level Chaos Beast, destroy them, Nie Tian said calmly. His expression was calm, but his eyes were filled with the most terrifying killing intent. Roar! The beast of chaos's huge body trembled, and it roared to the sky. In an instant, the Starlight Ball exploded, and thousands of dazzling white lights rushed in all directions like a raging wave. Chi, chi, chi. The power of the morning star daybreak turned into white sharp blades, bombarding the 3 huge withered hands, and there was a piercing sound of explosion. Bang, bang, bang. The withered hands couldn't withstand the impact of the Starlight Ball, and they actually exploded from the impact. 3 violent tearing sounds rang out, and the 3 withered hands suddenly collapsed. Chapter 1083. Above the void, amidst the glaring white light, 3 figures flew out backward, drawing blood-colored traces in the air. The powerful aura of the 9th extreme Chaos Beast, plus the tremendous impact force of Morningstar Daybreak. The 3 Xiao family old ancestors were actually unable to withstand this kind of power, and were directly impacted until they flew out backward. When the crowd saw this scene, their expressions were astounded to the extreme, indescribable shock surging in their hearts. Who could have thought that Nie Tian, who was originally facing certain death, actually released the Titan true body in an instant? That kind of aura that broke through everything and looked down on the world made people's hearts surge, their blood boiling. Also, that glaring white light was like a sky full of sharp blades, directly shattering the attacks of the 3 Xiao family old ancestors and even seriously injuring the 3 people. The inconceivable scene in the void was simply shocking like a dream, making people feel that it was extremely unreal. Kill! Right at this time, a cold and austere voice sounded out. Nie Tian's figure shot up to the sky like a sharp sword, sharp and incisive, practically about to slice the void apart. Roar! The ninth extreme chaos beast roared at the sky, its enormous body actually sprinting wildly. Crimson flames surged on its body. Circles of crimson halos surged in the air like ripples, reflecting the entire stretch of sky crimson red, like a magnificent sunset glow, magnificent and beautiful. But amidst this gorgeous and colorful scenery, it was filled with the most terrifying, killing intent. The Tier 9 Chaos Beast body was huge, but its speed was extremely fast. The crimson wings behind it spread out, like two crimson rays of sunset glow falling from the void. Above the horizon, a crimson trajectory appeared, descending with a loud bang. A tremendous might surged out, turning into a crimson impact force, rolling down like raging waves. Xiao Shuanghen was in the void, but her body was out of control. She watched helplessly as the blood-colored berserk force pressed down, the horror in her eyes instantly turning into despair. She could never have thought that she would actually die in Nie Tian's hands. Nie Tian seemed to have long known everything and made preparations in advance. 3 third-level Heavenly Emperor martial artists joining hands, using the power of the Titan True Body, and actually lost at the hands of a first-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist. Such a thing was bizarre and shocking. But at this time, everything was already too late. The Crimson Chi wave fell down like a flame. After a bloody light, the bodies of Xiao Shuanghen and the other 2 people were directly submerged, and no bones were left. Just like that, the 3 Xiao family patriarchs died. Not even their bodies were left behind. Nie Tian stood tall in the air, smiling faintly as he retracted his aura. The 9th level Chaos Beast let out another loud roar, shaking the heavens and earth. After that, its huge body turned into a red light and disappeared. The crimson color in the sky disappeared, and the void returned to normal as if nothing had happened. But the difference was that the 3 ancestors of the Xiao family were gone forever. The huge cracks on the ground proved that they had made a move. Everyone's gazes were focused on the silver-haired young man in the air. Their eyes were filled with great shock, surprise, respect, fear, and worship. All sorts of emotions intertwined to form complicated expressions, causing them to appear infatuated. Nie Tian's strength was too terrifying. The 3 ancestors of the Xiao family, the strongest foundation of the Xiao family, were so weak in front of Nie Tian. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Nie Tian's gaze swept across the crowd below. His expression did not change at all. He was calm and indifferent. He knew that the reason he had been able to kill the 3 Xiao family patriarchs was partly because of the strength of the 9th level Chaos Beast and the terrifying impact of the Morning Star Daybreak. On the other hand, it was also because of the carelessness of Xiao Shuanghen and the others. They never dreamed that Nie Tian's strength would be so terrifying. And the third aspect was equally important. That was that even though Xiao Shuanghen 3 people were all 3rd level Heavenly Emperor martial artists, they were far from being as powerful as ordinary 3rd level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. Because they were already 900 over years old, practically reaching the limits of their lifespans. The limit of a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist lifespan was 900 to 1,000 years. But once one reached the limit of their lifespan, their martial body would weaken, and their essence, meridians, and spirit would also weaken. Hence, Xiao Shuanghen 3 people's actual combat strength was not much stronger than 2nd level Heavenly Emperor martial artists. Heavenly Emperor realm martial artists, even if they reached the pinnacle, ultimately had a limit to their lifespan. Once the limit was reached, no matter how heaven-defying one's talent was, one would also be powerless to reverse the situation. It was precisely because of this that peak Heavenly Emperor martial artists had to assault the legendary deity realm ceaselessly. Only by reaching the deity realm could one break through the limits of lifespan. Killing the Xiao family's 3 old ancestors, Nie Tian's figure slowly descended, landing beside Tian Liang and Tian Qiqi father and daughter. But the latter 2 had blank expressions, looking at Nye Tian in a daze, unable to utter a word for a long time. Tian Liang already prepared for the worst, but what presented in front of him was the best situation. This kind of enormous surprise from hell to heaven caught him by surprise. Lord Tian Liang. Nye Tian looked at Tian Liang and spoke solemnly. Only then did the latter react, nodding his head and answering. Nye Tian's gaze flickered, and he said, I'll leave the Shao family's people to you to deal with, but I don't wish for them to leave the Nine Cold region. Yes, I understand. Tian Liang nodded his head solemnly, his attitude respectful and deferential. Only all the way until this moment did he thoroughly understand how terrifying this silver-haired youth in front of him was. Of course, Tian Liang knew what Nye Tian meant. The latter didn't allow the Shao family's people to leave the Nine Cold region because he was afraid that they would go to the Sumer world. With so many peak heavenly being martial artists, they would bring terrifying turmoil to the Sumer world. Nye Tian nodded slightly, his gaze sweeping across the Shao family's people. The latter all lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. Lord Tian Liang. At this moment, Nye Tian originally wanted to leave, but he suddenly thought of something and said, I want you to help me find something. Please speak, Lord Nye Tian. Tian Liang bowed his head, full of respect. I need some 3 lives grass, but it must be over 100 years old. Have you heard of it? Nye Tian thought for a moment, then said. He just thought of this at the last minute, so he said it casually. After all, Tian Liang ran such a large auction house, and he had seen many things on a daily basis. 3 lives grass over 100 years old? Tian Liang was stunned. He clearly knew that 3 lives grass could only live for about 30 years. How could there be one that was over 100 years old? Actually, Nye Tian had already greatly lowered his requirements. In order to create an origin meridian for share, what he really needed was 3 lives grass that was over 10,000 years old. However, he was afraid of scaring Tian Liang, so he said one that was over 100 years old. He thought that as long as there was 3 lives grass that was over 100 years old, he might be able to follow this clue and find more. If he was lucky, he might even find 3 lives grass that was over 10,000 years old. Just remember this and help me ask around. Nye Tian didn't explain too much to Tian Liang. After saying this, he immediately left. His figure flickered a few times in the air, then completely disappeared. Tian Liang looked in the direction that Nye Tian had left in and frowned deeply. His face was full of doubt as he muttered, Is there 3 lives grass that is over 100 years old in this world? Father. At this moment, Tian Chi-Chi also calmed down. She seemed to have thought of something and said, Perhaps Elder Chen knows. Chapter 1084. Nye Tian went back to the Tian Palace and landed in the courtyard where Cher and Mo Rushi were. Nye Tian, where did you go? Mo Rushi asked when she saw Nye Tian suddenly arrive. She sensed energy fluctuations from his body, as if he had just fought with someone. Took care of a small matter. Nye Tian smiled and didn't say much. The 3 ancestors and the head of the Shao clan were dead. The Jiuyang auction house was powerful enough to take over Jiuyang City and replace the Shao clan. As for the other forces, after seeing Nye Tian's methods, they wouldn't dare to compete with the Tian clan. After chatting with Mo Rushi for a while, Nye Tian told her to stay by Cher's side and not to leave. Nye Tian said that not only to let Mo Rushi protect Cher, but also to make sure that the saint's mark in her body wouldn't be activated. There seemed to be a strange power within Snow's body that could suppress some of the sinister energies. After leaving Mo Rushi's courtyard, Nye Tian went to see Ni Jiaming. The latter was much better and would be fine after a few days of rest. Nye Tian, are you going to the Heaven World's sacred region? In the courtyard, Lin Feng frowned and looked worried. Of course, said Nye Tian, smiling indifferently. He knew that Lin Feng was worried about Lin. He was a threat to him. However, Nye Tian had to go to the Heaven World sacred region. How could he give up just because of Lin? Although Lin was the reincarnation of an ancient blood beast king, he didn't know that. Nye Tian had to kill him before he completely recovered his memories. Moreover, Nye Tian was also very interested in the hidden dragon Imperial Meridian. He was looking forward to the power of the fusion of dual supreme meridians. Be careful. Lin Feng knew that Nie Tian wasn't the kind of person who could be easily persuaded. Once the latter had decided, he wouldn't change his mind. Lin Feng didn't say much and just reminded him. Nie Tian slightly nodded. Lin Feng was an extremely sincere person. His sword heart was pure and untainted by anything. Even though Lin Feng knew that he was a member of Mingjian Mountain Village and that Mingjian Mountain Village had been destroyed by the celestial demon cult, Lin Feng still remained calm. But Lin Yi, who was Lin Feng's brother, was completely different. Lin Yi was a cruel and merciless person who would do anything to achieve his goals. The two brothers, born of the same mother, had gone to two different extremes. One could not help but sigh. Perhaps it was because Lin Yi was the reincarnation of a blood demon king. The hatred accumulated over many lifetimes had a heavy influence on his heart. Nie Tian looked at Lin Feng with worry in his eyes. Lin Feng's sword heart was pure, he was talented, he was determined, but he had a fatal weakness, Lin Yi. It seemed like Lin Feng still hadn't thought about how to face his brother. Lin Feng, I hope that Lin Yi won't become a demon in your heart, thought Nie Tian, frowning. In the next few days, Nie Tian and the others stayed in the Tian family's residence. Nie Tian had already decided that as soon as Ni Jianming recovered, they would return to Holy Light City and then enter the heaven world from the Jiuliang region. 3 days later, Nie Tian came out of his room. He was exhausted. He had been practicing the soul-devouring sword formation and wanted to comprehend the soul-devouring sword intent. Unfortunately, he had not succeeded. Don't worry, I already have the soul-devouring sword formation. It's only a matter of time before I comprehend the soul-devouring sword intent. Nie Tian smiled and comforted himself. If Elder Jian heard what he said, the latter would definitely jump up. What did he mean by a matter of time? Elder Jian had been comprehending it for hundreds of thousands of years, and there was no progress at all. Master Nie Tian. Just as he was about to go out of the courtyard to see Ni Jianming's situation, Tian Liang's figure appeared with an unconcealable joy on her face. Nie Tian smiled slightly. The Tian family was about to replace the Shao family's position. Of course, Tian Liang was very happy. Master Nie Tian, there is some progress on the thing you wanted. Tian Liang walked over with a strange look in her eyes. She was very excited. Nie Tian was stunned at first, but then he reacted and his eyes instantly became passionate. Tian Liang was saying that there was news about the 100-year 3 Lives grass. Nie Tian's expression stiffened for a few seconds. This was too fast. He had just told Tian Liang about the 3 Lives grass a few days ago, and the latter had news so quickly. She was indeed someone from the auction house. Previously, Nie Tian had only mentioned it casually. He didn't expect Tian Liang to really help him inquire about it. And so quickly. Lord Nie Tian, I've already asked someone who knows where to find 3 Lives grass that's over 100 years old. However, he wants you to meet him in person. Tian Liang calmed down a bit and said with a somewhat embarrassed tone, Okay, I will go see him immediately. Nie Tian said without hesitation. As long as there was news about the 100-year 3 Lives grass, he might be able to find the 1,000-year 3 Lives grass, or even the 10,000-year 3 Lives grass. That was something that could help create an elemental meridian. How could Nie Tian not be excited? Immediately, Nie Tian didn't delay and followed Tian Liang to a remote place in Jiuliang City. That person lives here? Nie Tian looked at the thatched hut in front of him. The surroundings were barren and overgrown with weeds. He could smell the pungent smell of alcohol from hundreds of meters away. If Tian Liang didn't bring him here, he would have thought that he had entered an unmarked graveyard. Yes. Tian Liang nodded and said, Master Nie Tian, this mister has a strange temper. If he speaks rudely, please forgive him. That's fine, as long as he doesn't lie to me. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His experience from his previous life told him that those with true strength all had strange tempers. Tian Liang came to a stop about 10 meters away from the thatched cottage and called out respectfully, Senior Chun, Lord Nie Tian is here. Can we come in? Nie Tian couldn't help but be puzzled. The Tian family had replaced the Shao family, and Tian Liang was the master of Jiuyang City. Yet, he was so respectful to this person. It seemed that this person had some background. "Come in." A loud voice came from the thatched hut. It seemed that the person was a little drunk and muttered, "I, old Chun, want to see who dares to call himself Nietan." And when Nietan heard that person's words, his eyes slightly narrowed. Then he used his divine sense to sense the person. His face suddenly changed, and he spat out a name, Chun Genie. Tian Liang suddenly looked at Nietan and was stunned. He said in surprise, "Master Nietan knows Elder Chun?" The person in the thatched hut was Chun Genie. The people of Jiuyang City called him Elder Chun. Very few people knew Elder Chen's real name. Nietan actually called out Elder Chen's name. It was very strange. However, at this time, Nietan's face was stiff. His eyes were a little blurred. His eyes were surging with unconcealable surprise and passion. "Drunkard Chun, why are you in Jiuyang City?" Nietan was surprised, and his face showed unconcealable excitement. Chun Genie, this name was too familiar. He was one of his best friends in his previous life and one of the 7 great elders of the God Realm Alchemist Guild. Just now, when Nietan smelled the pungent smell of alcohol, he had an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He used his divine sense to investigate, and it was indeed a familiar person. Chapter 1085. Outside the thatched hut, Nietan's expression stiffened for a few seconds before he finally relaxed. The expression in his eyes became somewhat complicated. "Lord Nietan, are you all right?" Tian Liang thought that Nietan was angry. His expression couldn't help but turn awkward as he explained, "Old Chen doesn't have any ill intentions. He's just, let's go in." Without waiting for Tian Liang to finish speaking, Nietan directly stepped into the thatched hut. Pushing the door open, Nietan was stunned by the scene in front of him. The thatched hut, that was only a dozen square meters in size, was extremely messy. Broken wine jars were everywhere. A slightly hunched old man was half lying on the ground. His eyes were drunk and blurry. He was holding a wine jar in his hand. When he saw Nietan coming in, he actually laughed mischievously. He raised the wine jar and said, "Come, let's drink another jar." Nietan clearly saw the face of the old man in front of him. Although he had aged a lot, he could still recognize that the latter was his best friend in his previous life. One of the 7 great elders of the God Realm Alchemist Guild, Chun Genie. But the current Chun Genie didn't have the slightest bit of elegance for back then. He had completely turned into a sloppy old drunkard. Back then in the Heaven Realm, Nietan and Chun Genie were good friends in alchemy. The two of them often discussed alchemy together. At that time, Chun Genie was handsome and elegant. He was one of the few people in the Heaven Realm who became a 9th-rank alchemist before the age of 100. Although Chun Genie was addicted to alcohol, he never got drunk. Moreover, he paid special attention to his appearance. Nietan even joked that he was a drunkard with misophobia. Compared to the sloppy old man in front of him, he was like a completely different person. Chun Genie. Seeing Chun Genie in front of him, Nietan's expression changed. His body swayed slightly as if he was struck by lightning. He suddenly roared. The deep roar fell, and a huge power was released. The thatch hut was directly overturned. The glaring sunlight shone down and fell on Chun Genie's body. He covered his eyes with his hands and looked very panicked, as though he had not seen sunlight for a long time. "Lord Nietan, this." Tian Liang was stunned for a second, and then a frightened look appeared on her face. She didn't know why Nietan suddenly became angry. Chun Genie had been hiding in the thatched hut for decades, and it was said that he had never come out. Now that Nietan had suddenly destroyed his thatched hut, how could this be? "Leave first. Without my order, no one is allowed to approach this place." Nietan glanced at Tian Liang and said in a deep voice, "Yes, yes, yes." Tian Liang didn't know what was going on and was completely at a loss. However, when he saw how furious Nietan was, he didn't dare to stay for even a moment longer. He nodded repeatedly and disappeared. Who are you?" At this time, Chun Genie covered his eyes with one hand to prevent them from being hurt by the sunlight. He looked at Nie Tian in panic, his voice trembling. I am the person who dares to call myself Nie Tian. Nie Tian took a step forward and directly came in front of Chun Jini. He stared straight at the latter and said word by word, Chun Jini, look clearly, who am I? Chun Jini was suddenly stunned. His eyes suddenly widened and revealed great confusion in his eyes. You are. Slowly, his face became frightened and shocked. The muscles on his face started to twitch uncontrollably. The words were on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't say them no matter what. This look, this aura, Chun Jini was too familiar with it. I am Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes flashed with unrestrained anger, and he almost roared out. Nie Tian, Nie Tian, Nie Tian. Chun Jini finally reacted. As if he had just woken up from a dream, his mouth kept repeating Nie Tian's name. His eyes flashed with excitement as he said, You didn't die. You actually didn't die. As he spoke, Chun Jini finally stood up and hugged Nie Tian like a child. He actually burst into tears. After a long, long time, Chun Jini finally calmed down. Looking at Nie Tian's face, he smiled foolishly. His eyes were filled with tears as he said, Nie Tian, you're really still alive. I'm still alive. Nie Tian nodded and smiled. Being able to see a friend from his previous life again made him feel as if it was a lifetime ago. Chun Jini, what exactly happened to your body? What made you like this? Suddenly, a terrifying anger flashed in Nie Tian's eyes as he asked in a deep voice. The current Chun Jini and the person in Nie Tian's memory were worlds apart. Chun Jini was a Tier 9 alchemist, but his strength was not strong. He was only in the heaven tier. Nie Tian knew that his age was only 200-something years old. This age for a heaven tier martial artist was equivalent to youth. But Chun Jini had a completely aged appearance. Nie Tian sensed for a bit. Chun Jini's strength had actually dropped. He was only in the first level of true essence. Chun Jini was a person who loved cleanliness very much. But now, he had become a drunkard old man. This extreme contrast made Nie Tian very angry. Someone must have done something to Chun Jini. That was why he would appear here and become like this. Nie Tian, I'm fine. I'm really fine. As long as you're still alive, it's fine. We're still good friends and can still discuss alchemy, Tao together. That's enough. Chun Jini shook his head vigorously, but was unwilling to say more to Nie Tian. Was it Luo Chenhun who did it? Nie Tianling asked coldly, the fury in his entire body like a burning volcano. Even if Chun Jini did not say, he could also guess a thing or two. Chun Jini still did not say and just shook his head. He could sense that Nie Tian's strength was only at the first level of Heavenly Emperor. What could it do even if he said what happened to him? It would only make Nie Tian even more furious. Scoundrel! Nie Tian looked at Chun Jini's expression and knew that it must be Luo Chenhun who dealt a vicious blow to the latter. But what he could not understand was why the Alchemist Association did not care. Chun Jini was a Tier 9 alchemist. He himself was also one of the association's 7 great elders. He was even once considered to be the next Alchemist Association's chairman. Luo Chenhun laying his hands on Chun Jini, the Alchemist Association's people should have stopped it. What in the world is Chun Xinwen thinking? Why didn't he stop Luo Chenhun? When Nie Tian thought of this, his entire body was even more enraged, roaring out violently. Chun Xinwen was precisely the Divine Realm Alchemist Association's chairman. Chun Jini, this association elder, was dealt a vicious blow, but Chun Xinwen actually did not care. How could this not make Nie Tian furious? If the Alchemist Association could not protect alchemists, then what was the use of the association's existence? Nie Tian, let bygones be bygones. As long as you're still alive, nothing will change. Chun Jini already completely calmed down. The turbidity in his eyes disappeared, replacing it was a bright look. Nie Tian let out a long breath of turbid air and calmed down slightly. A terrifying chill flickered in his eyes as he said solemnly, Some things can be bygones, but some things can never be bygones. The things that Luo Chenhun did, I'll get them back from him one by one. When the icy cold voice fell, the killing intent in Nie Tian's eyes gradually dissipated. Replacing was an indelible determination. Even if Chunjini was not willing to say the truth of the matter, yet Tian would definitely find a way to investigate it too. Chapter 1086. Zhuliang City, Tianfu, in a small courtyard. Nie Tian and Chunjini were sitting opposite each other. The latter had recovered some of his spirit and had changed into a white robe. Even though he was no longer as young as before, he still maintained his proper demeanor. Nie Tian, I quit drinking. Suddenly, Chunjini looked at Nie Tian and said. Nie Tian was startled. Then he laughed and teased. An old drunkard can also quit drinking. In the past, Chunjini was addicted to alcohol, but he would never get drunk. However, after the fall of Nie Tian, he came to Zhuliang City for some reason and became a true drunkard. Him quitting drinking now represented a kind of determination, bidding farewell to his previous life. The Chunjini of the past had returned. Chunjini smiled and didn't say much. He suddenly thought of something and said, I heard from Madame Tian that you want to find 3 lives grass that is older than 100 years. Yes. Nie Tian nodded. He was too excited to reunite with an old friend and almost forgot about the 3 lives grass. How do you know there's 3 lives grass that is older than 100 years? Chunjini smiled strangely and asked, I've seen it in ancient books. 3 lives grass is also known as the 9 lives demon cat. In ancient times, there were even 3 lives grass that was older than 10,000 years. I have a friend who needs this kind of 3 lives grass. Nie Tian said faintly. He knew that Chunjini was a strange guy who liked to study ancient medicine books when he had nothing to do. Moreover, he liked to go to places with few people to find medicinal ingredients. If there was someone who knew about 10,000 years 3 lives grass, it could only be him. Yes, I've also seen such records and even want to look for it. Chunjini said faintly. Did you find it? Nie Tian's eyes flickered with passion. Chunjini paused and said, I spent more than 10 years to go to the extreme north of Dongchuan Divine Realm. There's a place called Everlasting Eternity. I saw 3 lives grass that was older than 1,000 years there, but I didn't find any 3 lives grass that was older than 10,000 years. Everlasting Eternity. Hearing this place, Nie Tian's gaze couldn't help but tremble. He murmured, Isn't that where Dugu Ni is? Dongchuan, sword, evil Dugu Ni? Chunjini was stunned for a moment. He had also heard of the name Dugu Ni. Nie Tian nodded and said, Dugu Ni is in the everlasting heaven desolate domain. I've been there before and had a spar with him. Chunjini smiled faintly. Of course, he knew that in his previous life, Nie Tian's talent in alchemy aside, his talent in martial arts and swordsmanship was also top-notch. Moreover, he was a swordsman on par with Dugu Ni. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said in his heart, Looks like I need to make a trip to the everlasting eternity. He did not expect that a barren place like the everlasting land would have 3 lives grass that was over 1,000 years old. However, when he thought about it, it made sense. It was precisely this kind of barren land that could stimulate the 3 lives grass extraordinary vitality. Since the everlasting eternity had 3 lives grass that was over 1,000 years old, then it was very likely that there would be 3 lives grass that was over 10,000 years old. Thinking of this, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth couldn't help but rise. It seemed that there was hope of creating an essence meridian for share. Following that, Nie Tian and Chunjini chatted for another day. The joy of reuniting with old friends was not something that others could understand. The next morning, the figures of Nie Tian and the others appeared at the gate of Tian Tian Manor. They were preparing to leave. Nie Tian decided to first return to the Holy Light region to visit Li Yi, Nie Yuro, and the others. Then he would get the illusory flower blood lotus for Mo Rushi. After that, he would return to the 9 cold region and directly go to the everlasting eternity. Nie Tian gave the 9 demon dragon spirit cores to Chunjini and asked the latter to refine 7 transformation dragon heart pills. Right now, Nie Tian also had rank 91 mental energy and could also refine rank 9 spirit pills. However, Chunjini's mental energy was already at rank 97, so he was more confident in refining rank 9 spirit pills. Hence, he gave the demon dragon spirit cores to the latter. Shinjini, I will be back in a month at most. I hope that you will have refined the 7 transformation dragon heart pills by then. Nietian looked at Shinjini and smiled faintly. Don't worry. Even if I don't refine pills for a few decades, I will not become rusty. I can refine the 7 transformation dragon heart pills in half a month. Shinjini was very confident and said with confidence. Refining spirit pills for Nietian made him feel very good. In the past, the two of them were competitors. Now that Nietian asked him to refine spirit pills, it was obvious that he was indirectly admitting that his alchemy Dao was not as good as his. This made him very happy. Shinjini, Tianliang, and the others watched Nietian and the others leave with eyes full of anticipation. Tianliang had never thought that a young cultivator from the Shumi world could completely change the situation in the Jiuliang region in a few days. This was the power of a strong cultivator. Without Nietian, the Tian clan would never have been able to replace the Shao clan. They might even have been chased out of the Jiuliang region. After Nietian and the others left Jiuliang City, they headed straight for the Holy Light region. Lin Feng did not return with Nietian. Instead, he stayed in the Jiuliang region and prepared to practice there. When he became a celestial emperor, he would also enter the heaven world's godly region. Half a month later, a group of people appeared in the Holy Light region. Nietian did not return to the Holy Light Imperial City directly. Instead, he took a detour to the Xianyu Empire and sent Ni Zichun and Ni jamming back to the Wind and Cloud Forbidden Land. Too many things had happened during this period of time. Ni Zichun had to inform the Dragon Rebel clan. After leaving the Xianyu Empire, Nietan, Imo Rushi, and Cher arrived at the Holy Light Imperial City half a day later. The three of them did not delay. They passed through the outer city and headed for the inner city. After a short time, the three of them arrived at the main street of the first inner city. What's going on up ahead? At that moment, a huge square in front of them was crowded with people. Imo Rushi's beautiful eyes twinkled as she exclaimed. Nietian spread out his godly awareness. He frowned and said in surprise, "It's Duanmu Lu." He sensed a familiar sword intent. It was Duanmu Lu's 8 Extremes sword intent. At that moment, the 8 Extremes sword intent contained a trace of murderous qi. It seemed like Duanmu Lu was fighting with someone. An idea entered Nietian's mind, and he hastily walked over. In the square, the crowd was crowded together. In the center were 2 young men. They were both holding sharp swords and staring at each other coldly. One of them was a handsome young man with a black heavy sword in his hand. It was Duanmu Lu. The heavy sword in his hand was the 8 Extremes Kunwu sword. When Nietian walked over, the people around him unconsciously made way for him to walk to the innermost area. Duanmu Lu's sword intent has become stronger again. There seems to be a slight change. It seems like he has completely integrated the Iron Sword inheritance. Nietian saw that it was indeed Duanmu Lu. He could not help but smile in relief when he sensed the latter's sword intent. After Duanmu Lu integrated the Iron Sword inheritance, his strength had advanced to the first tier of the celestial being realm. Although he was not considered a powerhouse, he was definitely not weak. At this moment, his eyes were filled with immense anger as he glared at the yellow-robed youth and bellowed, "Apologize." Nietian was slightly stunned. He knew that Duanmu Lu was a steady person and did not like to look for trouble. He was so angry at that moment. He did not know how the young man in front of him had offended him. At that moment, Nietian looked at the young man in yellow, and his eyes sank. Chapter 1087. Nietian looked at the yellow-clothed youth opposite Duanmu Lu and couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't expect the other party to be so young. He looked to be around 12 years old, and his face looked very immature. However, this child's strength was incredible. He was actually at the first level of heaven being. The next moment, Nietian moved his divine sense, and the surprise in his eyes grew. This child's sword Dao realm was actually sword force. Sword force was not a high realm. Nietian was already at the pinnacle of sword soul realm, which was far higher than sword force. However, This child was only 12 years old. To have Sword Force Realm at this age, such talent in Sword Dao was amazing. Interesting. Nie Tian looked at the young man and couldn't help but curl up the corner of his mouth. He smiled faintly and was ready to watch a good show. Duanmu Lu was also at Sword Force Realm, and his strength was also at the first level of Heaven Being. He was evenly matched with this youth. It was hard to say who would win. I won't apologize. What did you do to me? You swordsmen from the lower world are all trash. The yellow-clothed youth looked at Duanmu Lu cold with an insolent and arrogant expression. Hearing the yellow-clothed youth's words, Nie Tian's face darkened, and he gradually understood. This yellow-clothed youth must have insulted the swordsman from the lower world, which infuriated Duanmu Lu. That was why the two of them started fighting. Could this child be from the Heaven Realm? Nie Tian's eyes suddenly darkened. Listening to the yellow-clothed youth's voice, he didn't seem to be from the Shumi world. Child, you are too arrogant. I will teach you a lesson today. Duanmu Lu's eyes suddenly darkened. He released all the sword intent in his body. A huge sword force bloomed in the air. Immediately, a powerful pressure was released. It was as majestic as a mountain. Duanmu Lu's 8 extreme sword intent was majestic to begin with. With the addition of the Iron Sword inheritance, its aura became even stronger. I'm a child? The yellow-clothed youth was very angry. He seemed to hate people calling him a child. He yelled sharply, "You're not much older than me." As soon as he finished speaking, the yellow-robed youth struck out with his sword. The long sword pierced through the air, agile and swift. Countless sword shadows appeared in the air like dancing snakes, whistling as they pressed towards Duanmu Lu. "Blockhead, be careful!" A crisp voice sounded from the side. It was Gu Wuyo. She had a nervous expression on her face and was extremely worried for Duanmu Lu. Nie Tian, why aren't you stopping them? Mo Rushi also transmitted her voice to Nie Tian. She was also worried about Duanmu Lu. Nie Tian smiled faintly and gestured to Mo Rushi not to worry. It's just a spar between kids. There's no need to be so nervous. If Duanmu Lu couldn't even take this sword, then he would be too much of a scumbag. Even Nie Tian would feel embarrassed for him. Arrogant. Duanmu Lu shouted in a deep voice, and the 8 extremities Kunwu streaked across the air. A huge sword momentum was released, but it condensed into a sword intent shield. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, all the sword shadows bombarded the shield, but they collapsed directly. They couldn't penetrate the shield at all. Duanmu Lu was calm by nature. In a situation where he didn't know the strength of his opponent, he chose to fight more conservatively and defensively. Then, the yellow-clothed youth quickly struck with his sword again, but every time, it was perfectly blocked by Duanmu Lu. You idiot! Do you only know how to defend? If you're a real swordsman, then fight me head-on. The yellow-clothed youth was, after all, young, and his repeated attacks were ineffective. He suddenly became angry and roared in a deep voice. Nie Tian also shook his head as he watched from the side. Duanmu Lu was very strong, but his temperament was too calm. Even with the powerful attack power of the 8 extremities sword intent, he still didn't have any aggressive nature. A swordsman must be domineering, ruthless, fast, and decisive. If one were to blindly defend, how could one improve their swordsmanship realm? Duanmu Lu was talented and had strong willpower. His only shortcoming was that he wasn't domineering enough. He was a little calm and dull. Attack! What's the point of always defending? Do you only know how to get beaten? The surrounding crowd was also depressed and shouted in unison. However, Duanmu Lu was like a block of wood, turning a deaf ear to everyone's words as if they didn't exist in his eyes. Brat, I must defeat you with this sword. At this time, the yellow-clothed youth was completely infuriated. His figure leaped high, and a sharp sword intent surged out of his body. A dazzling sword light appeared, which was hundreds of meters long, sharp, and extremely sharp. Oh no, this kid is angry. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes trembled slightly, and she glanced at Nie Tian, but the latter still looked calm, as if he didn't see anything. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered, and her gaze seemed to say, "Is there a teacher like you?" Seeing a student being beaten and still standing there like a block of wood. But Nye Tian did not care at all. His gaze was just looking at a black-clothed, middle-aged man opposite from time to time. That black-clothed man had been paying attention to the battle on the field all along, his gaze dark, very worried about that yellow-clothed youth. You guys are indeed people from the heaven realm. Nye Tian looked at that black-clothed man and thought to himself. He already sensed that this black-clothed man's strength was at the second-level heavenly emperor. Furthermore, his entire body was surging with a restrained sword intent, as if it was going to erupt in an instant. It was just that what made Nye Tian puzzled was that he actually sensed an inexplicable familiarity from this black-clothed man, as if he had seen this person somewhere before. Green Destiny Sword, one strike. At this time, the yellow-clothed youth's voice sounded out. His figure moved, wielding the sword with both hands, and slashed down. A terrifying sword aura instantly bloomed out, and the brilliance of the sword circulated in the space. Duanmulu, be careful. When Gu Wuyo saw this scene, he cried out once more. But Duanmulu did not seem to have heard it. His figure stood there like a huge mountain, not moving at all. Scared silly, when the yellow-clothed youth saw that Duanmulu did not move, he could not help smiling very mockingly. Paramount 9 Extremes, Devouring Cloud, Absolute Wave. But right at this instant, Duanmulu suddenly roared furiously. The sword aura that was suppressed in his entire body was released in an instant. A majestic sword intent surged into the sky, akin to a giant dragon coming out of the abyss. The surging power instantly erupted, directly blasting that sword image in the air until it shattered. The yellow-clothed youth felt a massive sword aura pressing over. His gaze involuntarily trembled, and he screamed out in shock. Little junior brother. Right at this instant, that black-clothed man who had been observing the battle all along cried out in shock. His figure moved instantly, directly appearing in the void. Sword intent was released from his entire body, turning into a shield, helping the yellow-clothed youth to block the powerful blow. Duanmulu suddenly felt a surge of sword aura pressing over. His body swayed slightly, unable to withstand it, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. But that sword aura clearly did not want to take his life. Instantly, it froze in midair and did not press down on him. Duanmulu, are you all right? At this moment, a figure appeared, landing beside Duanmulu. It was Nye Tian. Teacher. Duanmulu's complexion was much better now. He had a look of surprise on his face. He did not expect Nye Tian to suddenly appear. Actually, Nye Tian had already seen everything. He was about to make a move, but that black-clothed man suddenly stopped, so he did not make a move. Chapter 1088. Nye Tian looked at the black-clothed man in midair, and his eyes trembled violently. His entire body seemed to have been struck by lightning, and his expression froze. He finally remembered who the man in front of him was. It was none other than the son of his eldest disciple, Han Fei, Han Ling. No wonder Nye Tian felt that Han Ling was inexplicably familiar when he looked at him just now. He remembered that before he died, he had met Han Ling a few times. At that time, the latter was only a child of 6 or 7 years old. He had even hugged the latter and heard him call him Grandmaster. He had never expected that after more than 100 years, the two of them would meet again under such circumstances. You know me? Han Ling looked at the silver-haired youth in front of him, and his pupils suddenly shrank. He had a stunned expression on his face. He did not know the person in front of him at all. He had no impression of him at all. Moreover, this was the Shumi world, and he had come from the heaven realm. It had only been half a day, so how could someone recognize him? Everything was too strange. Han Ling was stunned, and he could not react for a long time. When he saw Nye Tian, he was still a child of 6 or 7 years old. He basically had no impression of him, and now Nye Tian's appearance had completely changed. How could he recognize him? Nye Tian's eyes trembled violently, and his gaze was surging with passion. He could still see Han Ling again. The excitement in his heart was indescribable. Mo Rushi, Duanmulu, and the others were also stunned. They looked at Nye Tian with their mouths agape, completely unable to understand what was going on. This person is also Nie Tian's disciple? Mo Rushi said in her heart. Because she already knew that Tang Hao and Li Yi were both Nie Tian's disciples, it was inevitable that she guessed that Han Ling was also Nie Tian's disciple. The crowd was also stunned at this moment, and they looked at him with dumbfounded expressions. Senior brother, do you know this person? The yellow-clothed youth was stunned for a moment, and he asked in surprise, Who are you? Why do you know my name? In the next moment, Han Ling came to his senses. His eyes shone with a piercing coldness, and the aura around his body surged, releasing a powerful pressure that pressed down on Nie Tian. He had come from the divine realm of the heaven realm to find Li Yi in the holy light region. This was a secret that absolutely could not be known by anyone. However, the silver-haired youth in front of him actually recognized him. This made him involuntarily raise his guard. Nie Tian's body trembled slightly as he broke through Han Ling's pressure. An awkward smile appeared on his face as he said, I'm not your enemy. At this time, if Nie Tian directly revealed his identity, Han Ling might not believe him. Moreover, it was very likely that he would be even more vigilant. If the two of them were to fight, it would not be good. When Han Ling saw that Nie Tian actually broke through his aura pressure effortlessly, his gaze involuntarily turned intent, and he immediately said in surprise, You're a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist. Nie Tian was first-level Heavenly Emperor strength. This made Han Ling very surprised. This place was the Sumeru world. How could a Heavenly Emperor realm powerhouse possibly appear? What was even more terrifying was that this Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist in front of him was still so young, looking only around 20 years old. Han Ling's first reaction was that the silver-haired martial artist was someone from the heaven realm, tailing him here. But after he made a move, the other party just broke through his attack and did not counterattack. Even his eyes were gentle, without any hostility at all. Who in the world are you? Han Ling's figure landed, his gaze fixed on Nie Tian with a scorching gaze, his mind spinning rapidly, but he did not have any impression of Nie Tian at all. Nie Tian was also stunned for a moment. This matter was indeed rather troublesome to explain. It was not something that could be explained clearly in a sentence or two. Where did this lunatic come from to dare cause trouble in the holy light imperial city? Just as Nie Tian did not know what to say, a furious voice sounded out. Following that, a massive aura descended. A figure landed, directly landing beside Nie Tian. It was precisely Li Yi. Teacher. When Li Yi saw Nie Tian, he could not help but be stunned. The reason why he rushed over was because someone informed him that Duanmu Lu had gotten into a fight with someone, so he rushed over without stopping. Duanmu Lu and the rest had been in the Holy Light Imperial City for a period of time and were already very familiar with Li Yi. Eighth senior brother. Seeing Li Yi arrive, Duanmu Lu's expression was slightly awkward. He knew that Li Yi had been secretly arranging for people to protect him. Li Yi's appearance here must have been informed by the Dark Guards. Junior brother, are you all right? Li Yi glanced at Duanmu Lu and asked concernedly. Duanmu Lu shook his head, indicating that he was fine. Teacher, what's going on? Only now did Li Yi notice Han Ling and the rest. He swept a cold glance at them, then bowed and asked Nie Tian. And at this moment, Han Ling looked at Li Yi and was actually stunned. His expression stiffened, and his lips trembled. Clearly, he was very agitated. When Nie Tian saw Han Ling's expression, he was slightly stunned. Could it be that the latter recognized Li Yi? You, your eighth uncle? In the next moment, Han Ling's stiff expression finally eased a little, and he exclaimed in surprise. Li Yi was slightly stunned. Then his eyes suddenly narrowed, and he exclaimed, Little Ling. When the crowd saw this reaction of the two and heard Li Yi's exclamation, they were instantly petrified. Nie Tian was also stunned. He did not expect Li Yi and Han Ling to actually recognize each other. You're really Little Ling. Li Yi was stunned for a few seconds, then finally reacted, and once again let out a strange, shrill cry. He had never imagined that Han Ling would actually appear here. Duanmu Lu, the yellow-clothed youth, and the rest all had dazed expressions as they looked at Li Yi and Han Ling dumbfoundedly. This relationship was too messy. Duanmu Lu was Li Yi's junior brother, but Han Ling actually called Li Yi eighth uncle. Looking at it this way, wasn't Duanmu Lu even Han Ling's elder? What was even funnier was that the yellow-clothed youth was Han Ling's junior brother. Therefore, for no reason at all, the yellow-clothed young master became Duanmu Lu's junior. Mo Rushi was even more surprised, looking at Nie Tian in a daze. It seemed like the black-clothed man was not Nie Tian's disciple yet, but his identity was one generation lower than a disciple. What was even stranger was that the black-clothed man's strength was actually second-level Heavenly Emperor. Mo Rushi simply could not imagine what Nie Tian's identity was in his previous life. Why was a random person that popped out so terrifying? At this time, Nie Tian went forward and said, Li Yi, let's return to the manor first. This place was seriously not the place to talk. Yes. Li Yi nodded heavily, respectfully. Han Ling looked at Nie Tian with a look of puzzlement and surprise. He suddenly recalled. It seemed like Li Yi called Nie Tian teacher earlier. Could it be that eighth uncle acknowledged a new teacher again? Han Ling had a stunned expression, looking at Nie Tian with a suspicious look, saying in his heart, even if eighth uncle wants to acknowledge a teacher, he also shouldn't acknowledge a child as his teacher, right? Under the strange gazes of the crowd, Nie Tian and the rest left in a grandiose manner. After a moment, everyone entered the Li Manor. In the Li Manor's main hall, 3 figures sat there. They were precisely Nie Tian, Li Yi, and Han Ling. Han Ling looked at Nie Tian, who sat on the main hall's main seat, and simply could not hold back anymore. He stood up and asked, Eighth uncle, this Mr. is? Since Li Yi was so respectful toward Nie Tian, no matter how strange it was in his heart, he also had to maintain respect. Li Yi's gaze looked at Nie Tian. The latter nodded his head. Only then did he say, Little Ling, he's your grandmaster. Chapter 1089. In the main hall, Han Ling looked at Nie Tian. After a full 10 seconds, his stiff face finally showed some expression, but it was still a look of disbelief. Suddenly, he looked at Li Yi, as if to confirm that this was not a joke. He is my teacher, your grandmaster, the former number 1 war god of the heaven realm, Nie Tian. Li Yi nodded heavily, giving Han Ling the most certain answer. Han Ling was still stunned, and he stared hard at Nie Tian, as if looking for a trace of evidence. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, When you came to the War God Temple when you were young, you secretly ate a 9th-grade spirit pill, and I used my sword intent to help you dissolve the powerful medicinal power of the spirit pill. Hearing Nie Tian's words, Han Ling was stunned, and then his eyes suddenly widened. He remembered this very clearly. Only he and Nie Tian knew, not even his father Han Fei. Grandmaster. Finally, Han Ling reacted and believed that the person in front of him was Nie Tian, and he knelt on the ground, extremely excited. Nie Tian took a step forward, helped him up, and said with a smile, I'm really happy to see that you're fine. Facing 100 pairs of grand disciples, Nie Tian was really not used to it. After a while, the 3 of them calmed down. Han Ling told him everything that had happened. It turned out that he was saved by the limitless sword saint, Mo Qianjun, and then Mo Qianjun kept him by his side and accepted him as a disciple. At that time, Li was also saved by Mo Qianjun, but Mo Qianjun later sent Li Yi to the summer world. When Li left, Han Ling was already 14 or 15 years old, so he remembered Li Yi's appearance and recognized him at a glance. You're Mo Qianjun's disciple? Nie Tian was slightly stunned. He didn't expect this, and then he laughed and said, Don't call me Grandmaster in the future, call me Mr. or Lord. Since Han Ling was already Mo Qianjun's disciple, if he still called Nie Tian Grandmaster, it would be taking advantage of Mo Qianjun. Han Ling thought for a moment. Of course, he understood Nie Tian's meaning and nodded slightly. Han Ling, since you're Brother Mo's disciple, is the yellow-robed young master who came with you also a disciple of Brother Mo? Nie Tian suddenly remembered that Han Ling had addressed the yellow-robed young man as junior brother, and couldn't help but ask. Yes, his name is Pu Fifan, teacher's last disciple. Han Ling nodded and said, Little junior brother's talent in Sword Dao is very high, and he's Master's favorite disciple. However, he was too young and arrogant. This time, he followed me to the summer world because Master wants to sharpen his spirit. Yet Tian nodded approvingly and said, to have the strength of the first level of heaven being realm at the age of 12 and the sword momentum realm, this talent is indeed very high. Mo Qianjun had accepted a good disciple. But at such a young age, it's a good thing to have drive. There's no need to polish it. If Tian was Pu Fifan's teacher, he definitely wouldn't polish the latter's drive too early. He would let him be arrogant for a few years first, and it would be best to sharpen one's temperament after the age of 15. However, Mo Qianjun was a steady person, and his method of teaching was different. Hence, he would polish Pu Fifan's temperament in advance. If it were Jiu Qiansheng, he would be an impatient person. Not only would he not polish Pu Fifan, but he would also encourage the latter to be as arrogant as possible. Nietan, Mo Qianjun, and Jiu Qiansheng were all experts at the pinnacle of Sword Dao, but their personalities were different. Hence, their methods of teaching were also different. There was no good or bad among them, and the most important thing was whether they were suitable or not. Since Pu Fifan was Mo Qianjun's disciple, Nie Tian naturally wouldn't ask too much. The young man with the heavy sword just now was also not bad. If he was in the heaven realm, he would definitely be much stronger than junior brother Pu. Han Ling nodded and said, obviously referring to Duanmu Lu. Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't say much. Pu Fifan's talent in Sword Dao was very high, but Duanmu Lu wasn't bad either. It was just that because he was born in the 3,000 small worlds, his current strength was relatively weaker. If Duanmu Lu was born in the Heaven Realm's God domain, his current strength would most likely be in the Heavenly Emperor realm. His Sword Dao realm would definitely not just be sword force. Han Ling, did Lord Mo ask you to come here all of a sudden? At this moment, Li Yi suddenly asked. In the Heaven realm, Mo Qianjun was the only person who knew that Li Yi was in the Shumi world's holy light region. Ah! Han Ling reacted and couldn't help but cry out. He immediately took out a letter and passed it to Li Yi, saying, it was teacher who asked me to look for you. He asked me to pass this letter to you. Li Yi took the letter and directly opened it. After reading it, he passed it to Nie Tian. After the latter read the letter, he couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth into a bitter smile. Mr. Nie, what did teacher say? Han Ling couldn't help but ask when he saw Nie Tian's reaction. Nie Tian passed the letter to Han Ling, but he muttered to himself, it seems that the news that I'm still alive has already spread. Everyone who should know already knows. Mo Qianjun's letter was written to Li Yi. In his heart, he said that he already knew that Nie Tian wasn't dead and was in a Shumi world. He told Li Yi to find Nie Tian no matter what. Since Mo Qianjun knew that Nie Tian wasn't dead, then the others definitely knew as well. Although Nie Tian didn't know the identity of the Heaven Realm assassins that appeared previously, he was basically sure that they were definitely sent by Luo Chenhan. Mo Qianjun also said in the letter that if he found Nie Tian, he should not return to the Heaven Realm's God domain for the time being, because Luo Chenhan was already prepared to target him. It's that Luo Chenhan again. How does he know that Mr. Nie is still alive? After reading the letter, Han Ling couldn't help but look gloomy, his eyes releasing terrifying anger. His father, Han Fei, was still imprisoned by Luo Chenhan in the Sky's Edge Purgatory, and he hated Luo Chenhan to the bone. But he was too weak and couldn't save Han Fei at all. Teacher, what do you want to do? Li paused for a moment and looked at Nie Tian. What else can I do? Nie Tian smiled faintly, the corner of his mouth raised into a cold smile, and said, since Luo Chenhan has already spread out his net and is waiting for me, if I don't go, wouldn't it be a waste of his painstaking efforts? Heaven Realm's God domain, I must return, and I will return immediately. Luo Chenhuan's methods were cruel and vicious, but Nie Tian wasn't the kind of person who was afraid of death. He still hadn't gotten his revenge, and if he was scared off by Luo Chenhuan's stance, how could he get his revenge? Li nodded heavily. He already knew that Nie Tian would definitely not go to the Heaven Realm's God domain just because of Mo Qianjun's reminder. This was not in line with Nie Tian's character. Han Ling, don't worry. I will definitely save your father. Nie Tian looked at Han Ling and said solemnly. Han Ling nodded heavily, suppressing his huge anger. Every day, when he thought of his father suffering in the sky's edge purgatory, that kind of heartache was unbearable. He once asked Mo Qianjun why the latter didn't save Han Fei when he clearly had the ability. Mo Qianjun solemnly told him that the matter with Nie Tian back then wasn't as simple as it seemed. That's right, eighth uncle. At this time, Han Ling suddenly thought of something, and a scarlet token appeared in his hand. He handed it to Li Yi and said, Teacher asked me to give this token to you, saying that you will understand after seeing it. Chapter 1090. In the hall, Nie Tian and Li Yi exclaimed at the same time when they saw the crimson token in Han Ling's hand. You recognize this token? Han Ling was taken aback when he saw their reactions. This is the Crimson Flame token of the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace. Nie Tian said in a deep voice, his brows knitted tightly. He couldn't understand why Mo Qianjun would have the Crimson Flame token and why he gave it to Li Yi. The Crimson Flame Demonic Palace was a demon force in the Heaven Realm. They had invaded the Danite realm a long time ago, but were repelled by Nie Tian. The master of the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace, Lu Demonic II, was also seriously injured by Nie Tian. Since then, the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace disappeared, and Lu Demonic II also disappeared. 1 month after the Crimson Flame Demonic Palace invaded, Luo Chanhan betrothed Luo Zian to Nie Tian. Another month later, the two were married, and on the wedding night, Nie Tian died tragically in Luo Zian's hands. Only at the moment of his death did Nie Tian realize that during the past 2 months, Luo Zian had planted one of the 3 great evil curses, the soul-binding terror curse, on him by taking the opportunity to get close to him. On the wedding night, the soul-binding terror curse on Nie Tian's body broke out, and he resisted incomparably. In the end, he was killed by Luo Zian. It was also at that moment that Nie Tian completely understood that Luo Chenhan betrothed Luo Zian to him, and Luo Zian getting close to him was a bloody plot from the beginning. Thinking of this, Nie Tian's expression changed. After a long time, he calmed down. He looked at Li Yi and said, Li Yi, do you know why Mo Qianjun gave you the Crimson Flame token? Li Yi shook his head, then handed the Crimson Flame token to Nie Tian and said, Teacher, I feel that Lord Mo Qianjun's Crimson Flame token isn't for me, but for you. For me? Nie Tian took the Crimson Flame token and was slightly stunned, then immediately understood. Mo Qianjun knew that Li Yi would definitely find Nie Tian, so he wanted to hand the Crimson Flame token to Nie Tian through Li Yi. However, Nie Tian couldn't understand why Mo Qianjun gave him the Crimson Flame token. Could not understand why Mo Qianjun gave him the Crimson Flame token. Could it be that there was some secret behind the Crimson Flame token? Nie Tian, Yi said. Nie Tian, you know who? Nie Tian, Yi, Mo Don Vi, duh. Nie Tian, even if you kill me, you won't live. Long time, Ling Tian flame long, flame Ling, and Yi Tian time and time I Mo flame one hand. When Nie Tian fought with the Crimson Flame Devil Palace's master, the Luo Mo II, the latter said. At that time, Nie Tian didn't care, thinking that the Luo Mo II wanted to sow discord between him and Luo Chenhan. But now that he thought about it, it seemed that the Luo Mo II knew some secrets. The Luo Mo II said that I don't know who I am. What does that mean? Nie Tian was puzzled, and the expression on his face was tangled. Speaking of which, Nie Tian really didn't know his background. He was an orphan and grew up with an old man. The old man died when he was 5 years old. He only remembered that the old man called him young master, and he had no impression of anything else. Later, he went through the trials and tribulations on his own, all the way until he became the Heaven Realm War God, the pinnacle of Sword Dao. Along the way, only Nie Tian knew the hardships he had experienced. Because of this, he cherished everything he had, but in the end, he died inexplicably at the hands of Luo Chenhun, and his daughter. It was really unacceptable. Tian had thought of investigating his own identity, but unfortunately, before he could even start, he fell. In this life, he had been reborn, so he must investigate his own identity. No matter what, he must give himself an explanation. Thinking of these things, Tian gradually understood. Mo Qianjun gave him the Scarlet Flame token, as if hinting that if he wanted to find out what happened in the past, he must go to the Crimson Flame Devil Palace. Tian also felt that the Luo Mo too must know some secret. Mo Qianjun must have known something, so he used the Scarlet Flame token to remind Tian. Thinking of this, Tian frowned even more. He faintly felt that his death in his previous life was a shocking conspiracy, and perhaps it was far more complicated than he thought. The Crimson Flame Devil Palace is obviously an organization that appeared in the East River Divine Realm, and the Old Man of Heaven Wasteland is also in the East River Divine Realm, so I will go there first. Tian put away the Scarlet Flame token and made a decision in his heart. At this time, he looked at Han Ling and said, "When are you going back to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm?" Han Ling's eyes flickered and said, "Teacher told me to return immediately after handing the letter and token to 8th Uncle, and that we must not stay. He also told us not to return to the Limitless Mountain directly, but to go back after training for a while." Tian smiled. Of course he understood Mo Qianjun's meaning. The latter was afraid that someone would find out that Han Ling and the others had come to the Summer World. Mo Qianjun's style of doing things could be described in one word: calm. "All right, you can go back now." Tian did not let Han Ling delay, and immediately asked them to return to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm. "Mister, aren't you coming with us?" Han Ling knew that Tian was also going to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, and the latter obviously did not have a high-grade space-time scroll, so he thought that the latter would go with them, but now Tian did not have the intention to go with them. "I will enter the Heaven Realm from another place." Tian smiled faintly, and then walked out of the hall. After a while, they arrived in empty space. Han Ling took out the space-time scroll, and the space shook, and a large formation was formed. Tian sensed that it was a rank 8 space-time spirit formation, and it was enough to break the space barrier between the Summer World and the Heaven Realm Divine Realm. Han Ling and Pu Fifan stepped into the spirit formation. "Duan Mulu, I will wait for you in the Heaven Realm Divine Realm. The next time we fight, the one who will win will definitely be me." Pu Fifan looked at Duan Mulu with burning eyes, and it was obvious that he was still brooding over his previous defeat, and said confidently, "That might not be the case." Duan Mulu replied faintly, and he seemed to have become friends with Pu Fifan. "Lord Tian, 8th Uncle, everyone, we are leaving." Han Ling stood in front of the spirit formation and said goodbye to everyone. Then, the space-time spirit formation released a dazzling white light and directly tore the space apart. After the dazzling white light disappeared, Han Ling and Pu Fifan's figures also disappeared. It was the first time for many people to see such a scene, and their faces were filled with shock. The warriors of the Heaven Realm were indeed very terrifying. Tian looked up into the sky and muttered with a smile. His eyes were filled with blazing desire. "Luo Chenhun, just you wait. I will go to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm very soon. This time, I want to get to the bottom of everything." Tian muttered in his heart, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Tian returned to the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, not only to take revenge for his previous life, but also to get to the bottom of what happened in the past. Chapter 1091. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. During this half a month, Tian stayed in Holy Light Imperial City. Apart from cultivating, he accompanied Mo Rushi, Sher, Yuro, and the others. This period of time could be considered the most leisurely since his rebirth. At this time, Tian stood outside the Li residence, with Mo Rushi and Sher by his side. "Big brother Tian, big sister Rushi, big sister Sher, you must come back soon. I will miss you." Yuro's eyes were filled with tears. She was very sad. Tian also wanted to bring more people with him to the Heaven Realm, but his strength was too weak, and he was unable to protect so many people. In the end, he let Mo Rushi and Cher go with him. Under everyone's gaze, the figures of the three gradually disappeared. Half a month later, Niet Tian returned to Geelong City, but he did not stay here. One day later, he arrived at the space-time barrier of Geelong region. Lord Nietan, this is the space-time barrier that leads to the heaven realm god domain. Tian Liang pointed at the void in front. The state of the space, there was clearly different from the surroundings. It was the place where planes intersected. Niet Tian no longer hesitated. After taking one last look at Shunjini, he stepped into the space-time barrier. As soon as they stepped into the barrier, Niet Tian felt an immense pressure bearing down on him, almost suffocating him. He immediately unleashed his Deva domain to envelop Mo Rushi and Shui. This was a barrier formed by the intersection of a middle-level plane and high-level plane. The spatial pressure was so great that it could crush martial artists below the 9th level of the heaven realm to death. Therefore, to enter the heaven realm god domain through this barrier, one had to be at least at the heavenly emperor realm. Fortunately, Niet Tian was far stronger than the average heavenly emperor realm martial artist, so he could not only ensure his own safety, but also protect Mo Rushi and Cher at the same time. In the next moment, the space released a dazzling white light. A vast pressure came head-on, almost tearing Niet Tian's body apart. Niet Tian endured the pain, and after a few seconds, the tearing feeling suddenly disappeared. When the three of them opened their eyes again, the scene before them had completely changed. At this time, Niet Tian's face was flushed red and his chest felt stuffy. His body shook slightly, and he spat out a mouthful of dirty blood. His complexion improved a lot. Niet Tian, are you all right? Mo Rushi and Cher were very nervous when they saw that Niet Tian was injured and asked in unison. Niet Tian smiled bitterly and waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. The space-time pressure was too great. Even someone as powerful as Niet Tian's martial body was still suppressed to the point that his blood energy was churning. Niet Tian let out a long breath and began to observe the illusion around him. They seemed to have come to a barren land. The surroundings were desolate, and there were only very short shrubs on the ground. Occasionally, strange black birds would fly over their heads. It was very strange. Niet Tian gazed off into the distance and saw a broad road. Let's go there and take a look. The heaven realm divine realm's heaven-earth spiritual energy was dozens of times richer than the Sumer world, hundreds or even thousands of times richer than the 3,000 small worlds. Cultivating here for a day was almost equivalent to cultivating in the 3,000 small worlds for several months or even a year. Because a martial artist's martial body could absorb heaven-earth spiritual energy to a limit, it was affected by various factors. So even if the heaven-earth spiritual energy was rich to the point of liquefaction, a martial artist's strength could not improve at a rapid rate unless they had a special encounter and absorbed some powerful energy. Niet Tian was also not sure where he was now because the heaven realm divine realm was too big. Even he had not walked around the heaven realm divine realm. The center of the heaven realm divine realm was divided into 5 regions: Day-Night divine realm, East River divine realm, North Sea divine realm, West divine realm, and Sealed Snow divine realm. In his previous life, Niet Tian was in the Day-Night divine realm, but he occasionally went to the other 4 divine realms. Of course, he had also been to places outside the 5 major divine realms. After a while, the 3 of them came to a wide road. This is an official road, but I don't know where it leads to. Let's wait for a while, Niet Tian murmured, then looked into the distance. At this moment, a gigantic shadow appeared in the sky as far as he could see. It's the steel-backed dragon eagle. Niet Tian looked at the shadow in the sky. The corner of his mouth curled up into a smile, and he shouted the name of the giant bird. The steel-backed dragon eagle was a rank 7 spirit beast, a very common mount in the heaven realm divine realm, just like the 4-winged griffins in the 3,000 small worlds. Boom! Niet Tian's body shook slightly, and a sword intent was released, soaring into the sky, and a 1,000-meter-long sword light shot out. He wanted to attract the attention of the person above the steel-backed dragon eagle. Oh, as expected, the steel-backed dragon eagle let out a mournful cry. then flew towards Tion and the others. Let's get on the steelback dragon eagle first. Then we'll figure out what this place is, Tion said to Rushi and Cher with a faint smile. The two girls nodded. This was their first time in the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, so of course they would listen to Tion. The Heaven Realm Divine Realm was too big. If they were to wander around aimlessly, Tion and the others might not be able to find their way for a few days. Soon, the steelback dragon eagle descended and landed about 100 meters away from Tion and the others. Rushi and Cher stared at the giant black bird in front of them in amazement. It was simply a huge creature, at least 500 to 600 meters long, and with its wings spread out, it could reach a length of 1,000 meters. There were many people standing on the steelback dragon eagle, all dressed in the same outfit. Beside them, there were many big boxes with the support of spiritual arrays, seemingly containing something valuable. Tion took a look and immediately understood. This steelback dragon eagle was raised by a certain merchant group and was specially used to transport goods. Who are you people? At this time, a gray-robed old man stood up. His aura was not weak, actually at the 9th level of the Heaven Realm. He spoke in a deep voice, appearing very cautious. Old mister, we are martial artists from the Sumeru Realm. This is our first time in the Heaven Realm Divine Realm, and we would like to hitch a ride. You just need to take us to a nearby city. Tion was very sincere, directly telling the truth. With a glance, he knew that this gray-robed old man was the kind of person who had seen countless people. If he lied in front of the latter, it was very likely that he would be exposed, and it would not be good for him. At this time, the martial artists behind the old man walked up one after another, their greedy eyes wandering between Rushi and Cher. These two girls are so beautiful. Yeah, look at their little cheeks. A gentle touch can squeeze water out of them. If these girls are willing to accompany me for a night, I am willing to live 100 years less. Hearing these people's filthy words, Tion's eyes slightly narrowed, and a sharp cold light flashed in his eyes. Martial artists from the Sumeru realm? Almost at the same time, the gray-robed old man's eyes suddenly darkened, and his divine sense swept over Tion and the others. Suddenly, his brows furrowed, and he roared, "You're lying." Boom! The next moment, the martial artists on the steelback dragon eagle suddenly became vigilant and released their aura, connecting into one, pressing down like a mountain. Tion's eyes trembled violently. He did not want to make a move, but it seemed that it was impossible. Chapter 1092. Just as Tion was about to make a move, a white-clothed figure appeared and shouted delicately, making those martial artists all stop. "Miss Jew." All the martial artists were suddenly taken aback, then immediately called out respectfully, lowering their heads, not daring to look at that white-clothed figure. Tion's gaze turned intense slightly, looking at that white-clothed woman. The latter carried a long sword on her back. The aura around her retracted, but there was a strange sword intent surging nonstop. Very strange. First level Heavenly Emperor Strength, Sword Soul Realm. In an instant, Tion sensed the white-clothed woman's strength, and his gaze involuntarily turned intent, considerably shocked. This white-clothed woman looked only 25 or 26 years old, but her strength was actually so high, astonishing. There were not many female swordsmen in the first place. Those able to reach the level of this woman in front of him were even less than 1 in a million. "Miss Jew." When that gray-clothed old man saw the white-clothed woman appear, he immediately retreated to one side, bowed, and lowered his head, being respectful. "Your Sumeru world martial artists?" The white-clothed woman's beautiful eyes flickered, the corners of her mouth curling up into a strange smile as she asked coolly. Tion nodded slightly, but he was much more cautious in his heart. Although this woman's looks were devastatingly beautiful, her eyes carried a sinister aura. Especially that sword intent on her body, it was very strange. "Miss Jew, this silver-haired boy is lying. How can Sumeru world martial artists possibly have Heavenly Emperor realm strength?" The gray-clothed old man took a step forward and said solemnly, This young lady feels that he's not lying. Miss Ju smiled charmingly and said, "More than a month ago, wasn't there also a heavenly emperor realm martial artist from Summerworld?" Miss Ju, this boy looks like his talent is ordinary. How can he be mentioned in the same breath as Lord Lin Yi? That gray-clothed old man smiled sinisterly, glaring at Nyetian with a vicious gaze. Lin Yi. When Nyetian heard this name, his gaze could not help trembling. Very clearly, the Lin Yi that this gray-clothed old man spoke of was the Lin Yi who entered the Heaven Realm's divine realm more than a month ago. Lin Yi and Nyetian entered the Heaven Realm's god domain first. So Lin Yi didn't know Nyetian's current strength. "Ha!" Just as the old man finished speaking, a crisp slap rang out. Half of the old man's face immediately swelled up. "Idiot! Do you think you can say Lin Yi's name like that?" Miss Ju scolded. She was the one who had slapped him. The old man was slapped in the face, but he didn't dare to be angry. Instead, he slapped himself and said, "It's a slip of the tongue, a slip of the tongue. All right." Miss Ju shot a cold glance at the gray-robed old man and berated him. Then, she turned to Nyetian and said with a smile, "My servant is too stupid. I made a fool of myself in front of you." The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. He thought for a moment and said, "Miss Ju, can we come up?" Originally, Nyetian felt that this Miss Ju was a bit strange, so he didn't want to get on the iron-backed dragon eagle. However, the gray-robed old man had mentioned Lin Yi, so he couldn't help but be curious about Lin Yi. "You're welcome. Just call me Julian." Julian smiled sweetly and let Nyetian come up. "May I know your name?" Nyetian. Nyetian didn't even bother to hide his name. Then he asked Mo Rushi and Shui, or to go up first before he went up. "Nice name." Julian laughed. She seemed very enthusiastic. "Miss Ju, you don't need to worry about us. Just bring us to the nearest city," Nyetian said to Julian, then found an empty place for Mo Rushi and Shui to sit down. Julian nodded and smiled. She didn't disturb Nyetian anymore. Instead, she walked to a small house on the back of the iron-backed dragon eagle. The back of the iron-backed dragon eagle was hundreds of meters long and wide. It was enough to build a mansion. Cough, cough. At this time, 2 coughs came from inside that house. It was very light. Hearing the voice, it should be a 13 or 14 years old girl. Nyetian did not mind either. He stuck close to Shui and sat down. Following that, the iron-backed dragon eagle flew up, galloping for 10,000 miles, charging straight for the clouds. After Nyetian felt a jolt, he settled down after a moment. At this time, Nyetian shut his eyes slightly, but his divine sense secretly spread out. He wanted to see what kind of strength these people had. Very soon, Nyetian opened his eyes again, but his expression was somewhat surprised. These martial artists around him, their strengths were not too high. They were merely just 7th or 8th level Deva being. But at the very back of the iron-backed dragon eagle, there were 3 finely dressed youths, all 1st level heavenly emperor strength, their auras powerful. Apart from this, there was also a 2nd level heavenly emperor strength green-robed old man beside these 3 finely dressed youths. It seemed like these 4 people were together, separated from Julian and the rest. After a moment, the iron-backed dragon eagle completely calmed down. The surrounding martial artists started to become restless. Greedy gazes swept past Mo Rushi and Shui from time to time. Furthermore, they lowered their heads and whispered to each other, occasionally bursting into laughter. Nyetian naturally knew what these people were talking about, but he did not want to cause unnecessary trouble, so he pretended not to hear. However, right at this moment, a figure walked over and stood beside Nyetian and the others. A pair of dead fish eyes stared straight at Shui. "What do you want to do?" Mo Rushi was even angrier than Nyetian. She stood up abruptly, anger flickering in her beautiful eyes, akin to 2 balls of flames. Interacting with Shui for such a long time, Mo Rushi had long regarded the former as her younger sister. How could she allow others to use this kind of gaze to look at Shui? Nyetian also stood together at this time, indicating for Mo Rushi to calm down. Then, He looked at that person coldly and said solemnly, "Don't provoke me." The person standing in front of Nyetian and the rest was precisely one of those three finely dressed youths with first-level heavenly emperor strength. That finely dressed youth swept a glance over Nyetian with sinister eyes, his eyes revealing extreme disdain, and said, "A trash that came from the spatial world also dares to speak to this young master like this." He already heard the conversation between Nyetian and Zhu Yin and the rest earlier and knew that Nyetian and the rest came from the spatial world. The heavenly realms, divine realms, people had always looked down on the people of the spatial world. This was the same logic as the people of the spatial world looking down on the people of the Trichiliocosm. I'll say it one more time, don't provoke me. Nyetian's gaze turned intent, his eyes suddenly turning cold. A terrifying killing intent surged around him, about to erupt in an instant. "Silver hair brat, your temper is very bad. Want us brothers to help you vent your anger?" At this time, the other two finely dressed youths also walked over, their eyes flickering with full contempt, not taking Nyetian seriously at all. Even if Nyetian was first-level heavenly emperor strength, this also could not change the fact that he was a spatial world martial artist. In their eyes, no matter how strong the spatial world's martial artists were, they also could not contend with the heavenly realms divine realms martial artists. "I won't provoke you. I'll provoke her." The first finely dressed youth who appeared swept a cold glance over Nyetian and suddenly said, and actually directly extended his lecherous hand toward Cher. Chapter 1093. The finely dressed youth's eyes flickered with an undisguised lascivious light, and actually suddenly reached his hand out toward Cher. Seeing this scene, Nyetian's entire body's aura suddenly erupted. The monstrous rage turned into piercingly cold, killing intent. In an instant, terrifying killing intent spread out, filling the space within several thousand meters. Everyone felt the bone-chilling killing intent, immediately akin to falling into an ice cellar. It was as if the essence meridians within their bodies were frozen by the killing intent. Everyone's gazes trembled violently. Their eyes, when looking at Nyetian, were filled with terror. It was just that in an instant, that originally calm, silver-haired youth became a sharp sword that killed. Oh, the iron-backed dragon eagle sensed the terrifying killing intent. Its massive body suddenly trembled. Following that, it let out a shrill wail, reverberating throughout the horizon. "Be careful!" The next instant, the two people behind that finely dressed youth detected the piercing killing intent and cried out at the same time, their faces horrified to the extreme. However, that person who reached his hand out seemed to be standing on the spot in a daze, and actually did not move at all, his eyes lifeless, expression stiff. It turned out that in that instant just now, not only did Nyetian erupt with an oppressive aura, he even used the eye of the starry sky's absolute tremor. He was only several meters away from that finely dressed youth. Such a close distance, the mental deterrence of absolute tremor was unimaginably terrifying. Even if Nyetian did not make a move at this moment, the finely dressed youth also needed over a dozen seconds before he could react. But would he not make a move? Of course not. Poor. Under countless gazes, a streak of murderous sword light flashed past. The sound of flesh being torn apart sounded out. Amidst a stretch of glaring bloodlight, that finely dressed youth's head fell to the ground. The bloody head rolled down. Everyone's gazes became utterly lifeless. The atmosphere on the entire ironback dragon eagle was deathly still, the air oppressive until it made people feel suffocated. No one could have thought that the battle was actually so direct and straightforward. Nyetian and the finely dressed youth were both first-level heavenly emperor strength. But the latter was like a child in front of the former, completely without any ability to retaliate. Furthermore, Nyetian was also vicious enough, actually killing the other party with the most bloody decapitation method. This kind of scene could awe the others even more. After more than 10 seconds, everyone gasped. The shock in their eyes had yet to dissipate. Everyone was extremely puzzled. Why was the well-dressed young man motionless in front of Nietian? It was as if he had been completely controlled and had become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Nietian's entire body was filled with killing intent. His cold gaze swept through the crowd, and everyone who met his gaze felt a chill run down their spines. Some people couldn't help but tremble. Who else dares to look at the lady by my side? This is the best example, Nie Tianling said coldly. A huge spiritual deterrence rippled out like an invisible wave. Everyone felt their souls tremble, and they lowered their heads, not daring to take another look. Old Thur. It was only at this moment that the other two young men in luxurious clothes reacted to the situation. They howled, and then killing intent surged from their bodies. Their malicious gazes locked onto Nie Tian, as if they wanted to skin him alive. Nie Tianling swept a cold glance over those two people. If the other party dared to make a move, he did not mind killing two more people. These Heaven Realm's divine realm martial artists thought that they had some strength, and they were unbelievably insolent, looking down on the people of the spatial world. Little did they know that they were merely a little lucky, being born in the Heaven Realm's divine realm. That was all. Stop. Right at this time, an aged voice sounded out. A figure walked over. It was precisely that old man in azure clothes who had been staying together with the three young men in luxurious clothes all along. Elder Wang. When the two young men in luxurious clothes saw the old man in azure clothes appear, they immediately bowed and shouted, their expressions respectful. Nie Tian glanced at the old man in azure clothes in front of him. The latter's strength was second-level Heavenly Emperor, one level higher than him. But he was not afraid in the slightest. If this old man did not know what was good for him, he did not mind killing another person. A mere second-level Heavenly Emperor martial artist, Nie Tian did not take him seriously in the slightest. Spiritual attack. Impressive. The old man in azure clothes sized up Nie Tian with a pair of cold eyes, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly. Apart from viciousness in his gaze, there was also unconcealable fear. Spiritual attack. Hearing the old man in azure clothes words, everyone's gazes trembled fiercely, immediately understanding why, when Nie Tian made a move just now, that young man in luxurious clothes did not react at all like a fool. It turned out that he was hit by Nie Tian's spiritual attack. At this moment, everyone's eyes when looking at Nie Tian became even more horrified. Martial artists able to use spiritual attacks were not many to begin with. But Nie Tian's spiritual attack earlier completely did not have any signs, instantly controlling a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist. This was too bizarre. Only all the way until this time did these people understand that it turned out that this silver-haired martial artist from the spatial realm in front of them was actually so terrifying. Brat, do you know who we are? Suddenly, the old man in azure clothes released a cold light in his eyes, the threatening intent not concealed at all. Do you think that I'll care? Nie Tian shot the old man in azure clothes a glance and replied coldly. He just came to the Heaven Realm divine domain. How would he know who this old man was? The other party was also not the Heaven Realm 9 Emperors or a big shot at the pinnacle of Sword Dao. Brat, I is the Lone Eagle Fort's third elder, Wang Changfeng. Wang Changfeng was thoroughly infuriated by Nie Tian. He shouted coldly, his eyes flickering with cold intent. When Wang Changfeng's words fell, it immediately caused everyone to discuss animatedly. They're from the Lone Eagle Fort. No wonder they're so arrogant. Yeah, the Lone Eagle Fort is a third-rate faction in the East River Divine Domain. The entire Lone Eagle Ridge is the Lone Eagle Fort's sphere of influence. This old man is actually the Lone Eagle Fort's third elder. No wonder Eldest Miss didn't let us provoke them. Everyone's exclamations of astonishment made Wang Changfeng even more pleased with himself. The disdain in his eyes intensified. But Nie Tian shook his head slightly, looking at Wang Changfeng like he was looking at an idiot. This guy was at least 300 to 400 years old. His age was already like a dog's body. A mere third-rate faction in the East River Divine Domain also dared to be so arrogant. In that case, we're currently in the East River Divine Domain. Nye Tian smiled faintly, his face actually revealing delight. His luck was pretty good, directly arriving at the East River Divine Domain. In, Wang Changfeng was stunned. Only now did he realize that the other party did not take him seriously at all, completely ignoring his existence. But he was still considered somewhat rational and did not directly make a move. The method that Nye Tian used to kill the finely dressed youth earlier was too bizarre, making him apprehensive. Wang Changfeng's gaze looked into the distance. On the ground, a majestic ancient city appeared. Ahead is Lonesome City. That place is our lone Eagle Fort's territory. As long as we let this brat enter Lonesome City, he's dead for sure. The corners of Wang Changfeng's mouth curled up into a hint of a cold smile as he said viciously in his heart. He was not in a hurry to make a move because he did not know just what Nye Tian's strength was like. Faintly, he sensed that Nye Tian was not simple, so he absolutely could not be careless. Might as well wait until they reached Lonesome City. At that time, he would have more assurance in making a move. Brat, we'll wait and see. Wang Changfeng gave a cold laugh and actually turned around to leave. The crowd's gaze trembled, their faces dumbfounded. As the lone Eagle Fort's third elder, Wang Changfeng was actually afraid and did not dare to make a move against Nye Tian. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched. He indicated for Mo Rushi and Cher to sit down, and he also sat down. Chapter 1094. On the Ironback Dragonhawk, Nye Tian and Mo Rushi and Cher were sitting together. At this time, no one dared to look around casually. The scene of Nye Tian killing the lone Eagle Castle's people was still echoing in their minds. Nye Tian even dared to kill the lone Eagle Castle's people. How could he be lenient towards others? Nye Tian sat there, his face expressionless, but his heart was very clear. When the lone Eagle Castle's people were provoking him, Julian had been watching from the side. Obviously, she was using the lone Eagle Castle's people to test Nye Tian's strength. Nye Tian guessed that the lone Eagle Castle's people were the same as him, hitching a ride. Julian was the master of this Ironback Dragonhawk. Cough, cough. At this time, 2 dry coughs came from the small house. Nye Tian frowned slightly. It seemed that the girl who coughed had a serious illness. That weak aura gave Nye Tian a familiar feeling. Suddenly, Nye Tian looked at the huge box in front of him. Strangely, he couldn't see what was inside with his starry sky eyes. The box was surrounded by a high-grade spiritual shielding array. Nye Tian's divine sense couldn't penetrate it directly. If he forcibly used the holographic divine rune, he could sense what was inside the box, but there was a possibility that others might discover it. He didn't want to take this risk, so he didn't force it. After a while, the Ironback Dragonhawk arrived above a majestic ancient city. Everyone could see the whole city. Looking down from this angle, the structure of the entire city could be seen at a glance. We've arrived at Lonely Little City. Wang Changfeng looked at the ancient city under his feet. His heart trembled, and a poisonous light flashed in his eyes. He couldn't help but look at Nye Tian. Elder Wang, are you going to go down here? Julian's voice sounded from the small house. Miss Ju will go down here. However, Wang Changfeng's tone was very respectful, but he suddenly raised his voice and looked at Nye Tian. Someone also said that he wanted to go to the nearest city. Now that we've arrived at Lonely Little City, shouldn't we go down? The enigmatic voice was obviously referring to Nye Tian and the others. At this time, Julian walked out, her white robes fluttering in the wind. She looked at Nye Tian and smiled. Young Master Nye Tian, are you going to stay in Little Goose City as well? Of course. Nye Tian stood up and smiled. How could he not see that Wang Changfeng and Julian were working together to force him into Little Lonely City? He had already guessed that Lonely City was the territory of the lone Eagle Fort. Wang Changfeng had forced Nye Tian to go to Lonely City because he wanted to kill him in the city. Julian smiled lightly and signaled to the other person. The Ironback Dragonhawk immediately slowed down. It quickly stabilized and hovered in the air. Elder Wang, young Master Nye Tian, please. Julian had a faint smile on her face as she gestured for Nye Tian and the others to leave. Thank you, Miss Ju. Wang Chanfeng cupped his hands and thanked her. Then, he looked at Nie Tian and waited for Nie Tian to leave before he went down. Miss Ju. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly looked at Zhu Yin and said, "The girl in the room seems to be sick. Can I take a look?" Huh? Zhu Yin frowned, and her eyes flashed with anger. Then, she said in a cold tone, "Young Master Nie Tian, my sister is not sick. There is no need for you to meddle in her business. Our second miss is not sick. She's just physically weak." The old man in gray, who was standing beside Zhu Yin, said in a cold tone. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed that Zhu Yin and the old man in gray were very secretive about the little girl's illness and did not allow others to talk about it. "Sister, don't quarrel with others." At this time, a weak voice came from the room. Then a little girl walked out. However, she had only taken 2 steps when she was hit by a strong wind from high up in the sky. Her body went limp and she almost fell. Ruo. Zhu Yin saw that her sister had suddenly walked out. She moved and supported her. Huh? When Ye Tian saw the weak little girl, he suddenly frowned and his eyes became slightly complicated. The little girl was about 13 or 14 years old. Her facial features were delicate and delicate. What was most surprising was that the little girl's skin was crystal clear like white jade. It was almost transparent. This was not the delicate skin of an ordinary girl. It was a sickly white. It was so pale that one could even see the blood vessels and organs in her body through her skin. Nye Tian was not the only one who could see it. Everyone else could see it. This kind of scene was very frightening. It gave people a creepy feeling. When Nye Tian saw this, his eyes trembled and he spat out 4 words. Meridian less body. No wonder Nye Tian felt that Jurua's aura was somewhat familiar. It turned out that she was the legendary Meridian less body. The Meridian less body was a kind of congenital disease. People were born without meridians. Ordinary people were born with 4 limbs, 100 meridians, and 9 energy meridians, but they had not awakened them. However, people with the meridian-less body were born with weak meridians and no energy meridians. This kind of people usually died the moment they were born. Even if they survived, they would definitely not live past childhood. Nye Tian did not know how Jurua, who was born without meridians, could live until now. How do you know about the meridian-less body? Zhu Yin was suddenly stunned. Her eyes flashed with killing intent. Brat, who the hell are you? The gray-robed old man also became angry and growled. Jurua's meridian-less body was a secret of the Zhu family. Nye Tian glanced at Jurua and said it immediately. This was too strange. I'm an alchemist. Nye Tian became cold and said in a deep voice. Meridian-less body. Nye Tian was very familiar with it. Hence, he identified it at first glance. In his previous life, Nye Tian had a friend who was a meridian-less body. This person's status was very high, and her strength was also very strong. She was one of the Heaven Realm's peak powerhouses, the only female among the Heaven Realm 9 emperors, Cold Emperor Mao Xianglong. Nye Tian had always been very curious. Mao Xianglong was born with a meridian-less body. How could she possibly grow to 9th level Heavenly Emperor strength? People with meridian-less bodies found it hard to even survive. Mao Xianglong was actually able to reach peak Heavenly Emperor with a meridian-less body. It truly made people sigh in admiration. Alchemist. When everyone heard Nye Tian's words, they were collectively stunned, their eyes becoming extremely strange. Who could have thought that a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist from the spatial world was actually an alchemist too? For Nye Tian to be able to reach Heavenly Emperor realm strength in the spatial world, this was already super talent breaking through plane restrictions. And he was actually even alchemist. The terror of his talent was unimaginable. Is what you said true? Zhu Yin's beautiful eyes flickered, revealing a hint of unconcealable heat, as if grabbing a life-saving straw. Nye Tian did not speak either. A palm reached out. The 9 heavenly fire art revolved in his body. Blazing flames actually gushed out of thin air between his 5 fingers, dancing wildly in the air like a long snake. Chapter 1095. Nye Tian withdrew his palm and the flame disappeared. He looked directly at Zhu Yin and said, "Do you believe me now?" Zhu Yin's eyes trembled as she looked at the gray-robed old man next to her. The latter nodded heavily and said with a look of horror, "I have seen rank 7 and above alchemists controlling fire, but they are far less powerful than this person. He is at least a rank 8 alchemist." Hiss! As soon as the gray-robed old man said this, everyone present gasped. The silver-haired martial artist was not only an alchemist, but also a rank 8 alchemist. Even in the entire Dongchuan divine territory, there weren't many 8th-tier alchemists. "No wonder your spiritual attack is so strong," Zhu Yin reacted and said with a look of horror. Alchemist's spiritual power was very strong. Since Nietian was in rank 8 alchemist, it was not surprising that he could use spiritual attacks. At that moment, the look in Wang Chongfeng's eyes changed as he looked at Nietian. If Nietian was really in rank 8 alchemist, he was someone that the Lone Eagle Fort could not afford to offend. However, in the next moment, Wang Chongfeng's face turned cold. The corner of his mouth twitched as he thought to himself, "Even if this kid is an 8th-stage alchemist, he's from the Sumi world. He definitely hasn't joined any other forces. If I kill him now, no one will avenge him." Thinking so, Wang Chongfeng's face became much calmer. "Mr. Nietian." But at this time, Zhu Yin suddenly stepped forward and knelt in front of Nietian and said solemnly, "Mr. Nie, please save my sister. Zhu Yin is willing to pay any price." "Young miss." The gray-robed old man did not expect Zhu Yin to do such a thing and immediately exclaimed, "Sister." Er's little face also stiffened and she screamed, "Mr. Nie, please save our young miss." Immediately, the surrounding martial artists all knelt down and shouted in unison. Nietian was slightly stunned. He did not expect such a scene to happen. "Nietian, please save this lady." Mo Rushi stepped forward and pulled Nietian's sleeve and said softly. She was kind-hearted to begin with, and seeing Zhu in such a pitiful and weak state, she couldn't bear it. Cher also raised her head and looked at Nietian with an expectant look. "Miss Zhu, please get up first." Nietian shook his head slightly, gesturing for Zhu Yin to get up first. All of a sudden, Wang Chongfeng took a step forward, pointed at Nietian, and shouted, "Miss Zhu, don't be fooled by this brat. He's just a piece of trash from a spatial dimension. How could he be an 8th-grade alchemist?" He was afraid that if Nietian really cured Zhu Yin would definitely not allow him to kill Nietian. The Zhu family was a powerful force in the Dongchuan divine territory. It was a second-rate force, much stronger than the Lone Eagle Castle. "Scram!" Zhu Yin suddenly shouted. She glared at Wang Chongfeng and said in a deep voice, "Get out of here now, or don't blame me for being rude." "Miss Zhu." Wang Chongfeng was shocked. He didn't expect Zhu Love to change her attitude so quickly. "Do you want me to repeat myself?" Zhu Yin's eyes were filled with killing intent as she spoke coldly. Wang Chongfeng's expression was extremely ugly. His face began to contort. He was obviously extremely angry. However, he didn't dare to do anything. Although his strength was above Zhu Yin's, the force behind her was the Zhu family. He couldn't afford to offend her. "Let's go," Wang Chongfeng said in a low voice. He took a step forward and left the steel-backed dragon eagle. The two young men behind him reacted and left as well. Nietian saw that Wang Chongfeng was scared away by Zhu Yin's words. He couldn't help but feel speechless. He wanted to play with Zhu Yin. "Mr. Nie, I beg you, save my sister." Zhu Yin chased Wang Chongfeng away and looked at Nietian with a sincere expression. Nietian let out a long breath. He looked at Zhu with a serious expression. He wanted to save her, but he didn't know how. The meridian-less body was almost an incurable disease. Although Nietian knew that Frost Emperor Mao Xianglong had the meridian-less body, he didn't know how the latter survived and how he increased his strength. The meridian-less body was somewhat similar to Cher. Although Cher couldn't cultivate, at least her life wouldn't be in danger. Zhu was different. Even the slightest movement would be a great shock to her. Her body was as weak as a piece of paper. One touch and it would break her. I'll take a look for her first. Nye Tian thought for a moment and said, he wanted to check Zhu Feng'er's body condition first to see if he could find the cause of the meridian-less body. When everyone arrived at the small house, Nye Tian discovered that the room was decorated very exquisitely. There were rare, medicinal ingredients everywhere. Basically, they were all spiritual ingredients of the 7th or 8th grade. There was also a 6th grade spiritual array outside the room to prevent external attacks. Zhu Lian protected Zhu Ruo very well. Nye Tian let Zhu Ruo sit opposite him. Then he closed his eyes and slowly spread out his divine sense to check the latter's body bit by bit. After a moment, Nye Tian opened his eyes. The expression on his face became even more complicated. He sensed that there seemed to be a strange power inside Zhu Ruo's body that kept suppressing her meridians. It was constantly absorbing power from her meridians, causing them to weaken. Moreover, Zhu Ruo's body had no yuan meridians. There were only weak meridians that were supporting her body. But the strange thing was that Nye Tian couldn't sense where the strange power in Zhu Ruo's body came from. This was very troublesome. If he could find the source of the strange power, Nye Tian could find a way to suppress it. That way, Zhu Ruo could at least live. But if he couldn't find the source of the strange power, Nye Tian didn't know how to suppress it. Mr. Nye, how is my sister? Do you have a way? Zhu Lian's face was nervous, her voice trembling slightly. The Zhu family had invited countless alchemists to treat Zhu Ruo, but none of them could. As for Tier 8 and Tier 9 alchemists, the Zhu family couldn't afford them. Since Nye Tian could see that Zhu Ruo had no meridians, maybe he really had a way to treat her. Nye Tian shook his head slightly. Suddenly, he thought of something and said, "What does Miss Eva usually eat?" "What do you mean?" Zhu Lian was stunned. She didn't understand why Nye Tian would suddenly ask this. "I want to know how Ruo survived until now." Nye Tian didn't beat around the bush and said directly, "It was a miracle that a person with no meridians could live to 6 or 7 years old. It was very strange that Zhu Ruo could live to 13 or 14 years old." Zhu Lian immediately understood Nye Tian's meaning and said, "When Ruo was very young, she took all kinds of medicinal herbs, but none of them worked. Only when she took the 3 lives grass liquid would her body get a little better. So I had people refine a lot of 3 lives grass liquid and let Ruo take it every day." 3 lives grass. When Nye Tian heard these 3 words, his eyes suddenly shrank, his face full of astonishment. He didn't think that it would actually be 3 lives grass again. It was as if this very common Tier 3 medicinal herb had suddenly become miraculous. And at this time, Cher's expression slowly changed, as if she was in great pain, her eyes welling up with tears. Chapter 1096. "Cher, are you okay?" Mo Rushi asked, nervously when she saw Cher's painful expression. Nye Tian's face also tightened. Thinking of Cher's reaction when she saw the 3 lives grass, he immediately became nervous. It seemed that Cher and the 3 lives grass had a mysterious relationship. Whenever she saw the 3 lives grass, her emotions would inexplicably change. "I'm fine." Cher raised her head to look at Mo Rushi, her eyes sparkling. Her lovely appearance made people feel pity for her. She said softly, "Sister Rushi, I want to go out." Nye Tian nodded slightly to Mo Rushi, signaling the latter to take Cher out first. "Mr. Nye, is your friend okay?" Zhu Lian noticed Cher's abnormality. It seemed that the latter also had no yuan meridian. "She's fine. Miss Zhu, may I have a look at the 3 lives herb that Miss Ruo has taken?" Nye Tian said, with a plain tone. Nye Tian wanted to see if Zhu Ruo took the normal 3 lives grass solution. "Of course." Zhu Lian agreed, then took out a bottle and handed it to Nye Tian. Nye Tian grabbed the bottle and stared at it for a long time. He examined it with his soul awareness over and over again, but didn't find anything unusual. However, he noticed that the 3 lives grass's color was somewhat different. Although it was still sparkling and translucent, there was a faint redness in it. Nye Tian was puzzled, so he asked, "Miss Zhu, This solution only contains 3 lives grass. Are there no other herbs? Only 3 lives grass. If other herbs are mixed, the efficacy will decrease. Zhu Lian nodded. Yet Tian was even more puzzled. He asked again, how old is this 3 lives grass? Old? Zhu Lian was stunned. She did not understand what Nye Tian meant. Mr. Nye, this is 3 lives grass that is more than 100 years old. At this time, the gray-robed old man beside Zhu Lian said. Nye Tian already knew that this gray-robed old man was called Li Quan. He was an alchemist, but only a 5th-stage alchemist. Old Li, where did these 3 lives grass come from? When Nye Tian heard about the 3 lives grass that was over 100 years old, his expression changed. He was so excited that he stood up abruptly. Seeing Nye Tian's reaction, Li Quan could not help but be taken aback. He only reacted after a few seconds. After thinking for a moment, he said, all of our medicinal ingredients are purchased from Clear Sea Trade Union. I only know that 3 lives grass is more than 100 years old, and its price is much higher than ordinary 3 lives grass. It is almost equivalent to a 5th or 6th tier medicinal ingredient. Bright Sea Trading Company. Nye Tian was slightly stunned. He immediately recalled that this was one of the 6 great merchant associations in the Heaven Domain. The one Li Quan was talking about must be a branch of the Bright Sea Merchant Associations. However, he did not know what level of branch it was. Mr. Nye Tian, is there a problem with the 3 lives grass? Li Quan couldn't help asking when he saw that Nye Tian wasn't speaking. No problem. Nye Tian smiled faintly and returned the 3 lives grass to Zhu Lian. He then asked, where's the nearest Bright Sea Trade Association branch? Since he knew that Clear Sea Trade Association had 3 lives grass that was more than 100 years old, Nye Tian, of course, had to find out the source of the 3 lives grass. Zhu Lian was stunned for a moment. She then said, there seems to be a Bright Sea Trade Association branch in Lonely Little City. It's right under our feet. Nye Tian was stunned. He didn't think that his luck would be so good. He immediately said, I want to make a trip to Lonely Little City. This. Seeing that Nye Tian was about to leave, Zhu Lian's face couldn't help but turn ugly. She said, Mr. Nye Tian, then my sister's illness, she had finally met an 8th tier alchemist. Zhu Lian was filled with hope that Nye Tian would be able to cure Zhu Ruo'er. Now that the latter suddenly wanted to leave, she was very disappointed. Nye Tian's face slightly stiffened. He said solemnly, the meridianless body is very troublesome. I haven't thought of a good way yet. It wasn't that he didn't want to save her, but he really had no other way. Zhu Lian frowned. Her face slowly became gloomy. Nye Tian let her see hope, but also let her down. This kind of feeling was not good. Big sister, I'm fine. As long as Big Sister is by Ruo'er's side, Ruo'er will be very happy. Zhu Ruo'er stood up with difficulty. She squeezed out a smile and said to Zhu Lian. Hearing the little girl's words, Nye Tian also felt very uncomfortable. He could see that Zhu Ruo'er was a very sensible and obedient girl. Even if she was born without meridians, she was still optimistic. This was very rare. Miss Zhu, I have some magic flower blood lotus medicinal liquid here. I'll give it to you as a reward for sending me here. Nye Tian thought for a moment, then took out a bottle of scarlet spiritual liquid and handed it to Zhu Lian. Before coming to the God Realm, Nye Tian refined all the magic flower blood lotus in the mystical flower valley into medicinal liquid. He carried it with him in case of an emergency. If Mo Rushi was forced to separate from Cher, she could use the magic flower blood lotus to resist the saint's imprint. Although the magic flower blood lotus medicinal liquid couldn't cure the meridians, it would at least be good for Zhu Ruo'er's body. Magic flower blood lotus. Li Quan suddenly cried out. He stared at the bottle in Nye Tian's hand with his eyes wide open. He was an alchemist, so he naturally knew that the magic flower blood lotus was a level 9 spiritual herb. It was a priceless treasure. Nye Tian actually gave Zhu Lian the spiritual liquid refined from the magic flower blood lotus as a reward for riding on the ironback dragonhawk. Li Quan could only say that this reward was too great. A bottle of magic flower blood lotus spiritual liquid could buy countless ironback dragonhawks. Thank you. Julian could tell from Li Kuan's reaction how precious the magic flower blood lotus spiritual liquid was. Although she thanked him, her attitude was much colder. Nie Tian didn't mind. After all, he didn't have a way to cure Juruo, so he felt a little guilty. Mr. Nye, since you want to go to the Bright Sea trading firm, you can stay here. Julian kept the magic flower blood lotus spiritual liquid and said coldly. Nie Tian sensed the change in Julian's attitude, but he only shook his head and didn't say anything. Eldest Miss, lonely little city is the lone Eagle Fort's territory. It wouldn't be good to let Mr. Nye stay here. There's still half a day's journey to Marshall Liang City. There's a level 5 branch of the Bright Sea trading firm there. Why don't you let Mr. Nye stay in Marshall Liang City? Li Kuan said carefully with a hesitant expression. Julian looked at Li Kuan cold, but didn't say anything. Nie Tian could naturally tell that Julian didn't want to see him anymore. There was no point in staying here, so it was better to leave as soon as possible. Although Little Lonely City was the territory of the Lone Eagle Castle, he didn't care about the Lone Eagle Castle at all, so it didn't matter to him. After leaving the small house, Nie Tian nodded at the Julian sisters and Li Kuan, bidding them farewell. Then, he jumped off the ironback dragonhawk with Mo Rushi and Cher. In midair, Nie Tian opened up his celestial domain to envelop Mo Rushi and Cher. The three of them landed on an empty space outside Lonely Little City, several thousand meters away. Aya! Just as they landed, Nie Tian suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but cry out. He had forgotten to ask Julian about Linny. Julian and Li Kuan had mentioned Linny before, and Nie Tian was still thinking about it. However, he had forgotten about it. It was too late to ask about it now. However, he guessed that with Julian's personality, he wouldn't be able to get anything out of her. Chapter 1097. Little Lone City, a small border city of the East River Divine Domain. But compared to the Summer world, this small city was not small at all. It was about the size of the Sacred Light Imperial City. After entering the city, Nie Tian did not waste any time. After asking around, he went straight to the Bright Sea Commerce. Along the way, the surrounding crowd constantly cast their gazes over. Of course, these gazes were all focused on Mo Rushi and Cher. The two girls were too beautiful, while Nie Tian, who was beside them, looked too ordinary. He was not worthy of their peerless looks. Moreover, Nie Tian's silver hair was also very unpleasant. From time to time, there would be people pointing at them and whispering. Nie Tian turned a deaf ear to these because he did not need to care about them. After a while, the three arrived at the Bright Sea Commerce. In front of them was a magnificent building that looked very imposing. Its scale was almost the same as the imperial palace of first-rate empire in the Sumeru world. Sir, welcome to the Bright Sea Commerce. As soon as Nie Tian and the others stepped into the commerce, four beautiful waitresses with white skin bowed together, their voices so sweet that it gave people goosebumps. Cher looked at the four waitresses curiously and asked in surprise, "Four sisters, what are you doing?" The four waitresses were amused by Cher, but they only dared to cover their mouths and laugh, not daring to laugh out loud. These girls were ordinary people. It was not easy to work as waitresses in the commerce and get a good salary. They did not want to be fired because of their excessive behavior. "Cher, they are working." Nie Tian smiled faintly and told Cher not to disturb the waitresses. Nie Tian was not in a hurry. He first walked around the hall. On the display table, there were all kinds of spirit herbs, spirit materials, spirit weapons, and so on. There were all kinds of things used by cultivators. After a while, a black-clothed man walked over with a gloomy expression. Coldly, he said, "These things are for display and are not for sale. If you're not going to buy anything, please leave." Nie Tian was slightly stunned and could not help but laugh. It seemed that this person treated them as country bumpkins and did not want to see them. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered and coldly said, "Snobs." The man was stunned. He did not expect Mo Rushi to say such a thing. Immediately, he became angry and shouted, "Guards, someone is causing trouble here. Quickly drive them out." Yes. Just as his voice fell, several voices responded in a deep voice. A dozen black-clothed cultivators appeared, their faces ferocious and ferocious. When the four waiters saw this scene, they immediately turned pale with fright. They didn't know how Nyetian and the others had provoked the black-clothed man. Nyetian glanced coldly at the surrounding black-clothed martial artists. They were all in the celestial realm. As long as he wanted to, he could kill all of them in one move. However, he did not want to kill them. Instead, he looked at the black-clothed man and lightly said, "Why don't you tell me? How do we cause trouble? You didn't buy anything, looked around, and even insulted this deacon. Isn't this causing trouble?" The black-clothed man straightened his chest and righteously shouted, "Who said I didn't buy anything? Can I look around first and then buy? The reason why you're being insulted is because you deserve to be insulted," Nie Tianlin coldly replied. His eyes emitted a cold light, scaring the black-clothed man and causing him to fall back and sit on the ground. Nie Tian glanced at him and knew that this guy had just been promoted to deacon. In order to make his presence felt, he was deliberately looking for trouble. Unfortunately, he found the wrong person to look for trouble with. The black-clothed man got up from the ground, his face flushed red. Obviously, he was furious. He pointed at Nie Tian and roared, "Kill this troublemaker for this deacon." The martial artists were stunned. No one dared to make a move. Instead, they all retreated. At this time, Nie Tian's entire body released surging sword intent. His entire person was like a murderous sword. His cold eyes swept past, and an almost tangible killing intent enveloped the entire hall. These martial artists could feel that as long as they dared to make any move, they would definitely die tragically on the spot. Bright Sea Commerce's people, if all of you are so snobbish, I think your commerce won't exist for long. At this time, Nie Tian did not make a move. Instead, he said lightly. The surrounding crowd's eyes suddenly trembled. They all said in their hearts, "Who is this guy? He dares to say such words?" When the Bright Sea Commerce said that it would not exist for long, Nie Tian was provoking the entire Bright Sea Commerce. As one of the 6 great commerce of the Divine Realm, the Bright Sea Commerce's strength was stronger than the first-rate forces of the 5 major regions. "Stinking brat, you dare to say such words? You're dead." The black-clothed man smiled coldly. For Nie Tian to say such words, the Bright Sea Commerce's people would kill him even if they didn't ask any questions. "Old sir, you've been watching for so long. Shouldn't you come out and say a few words?" At this time, Nie Tian's gaze suddenly looked in a direction on the 2nd floor. Where his gaze landed, a gray-clothed old man was standing there. "President Lon." The black-clothed man immediately saw the gray-clothed old man and cried out in alarm. It was as if he had grabbed a life-saving straw. He said loudly, "Lord President, this brat is provoking the Bright Sea Commerce. Quickly make a move and kill him." The gray-clothed old man was none other than the president of the Bright Sea Commerce's Little Lone City branch, Lan Ting. Nie Tian had long discovered Lan Ting's existence. It was just that he had never shown it. Lan Ting's strength was very strong. He was actually a 2nd-level heavenly emperor. He was indeed worthy of being a member of the Bright Sea Commerce. "Shut up." At this time, Lan Ting's figure moved and directly descended from the 2nd floor. Suddenly, a swift and fierce aura descended and pressed down on the black-clothed man. The latter was directly bombarded and sent flying. "Liang Chung, you're no longer a member of the Bright Sea Commerce. Our Bright Sea Commerce doesn't need a deacon like you. Get lost." Lan Ting looked Liang Chung coldly and said in a deep voice, "Lord President, Liang Cheng's face suddenly turned pale. He had crawled for more than 10 years to climb to the position of deacon. How could he accept that it was gone just like that? "Get lost." Lan Ting didn't give Liang Chung any chance to explain. With a low roar, a huge force flew up and directly blasted Liang Chung out of the hall. Lan Ting saw the incident very clearly from the beginning to the end. As the president, how could he allow such a person to ruin the reputation of the commerce? Bright Sea Commerce. At least there's a sensible person. Nie Tian smiled faintly and glanced at Lan Ting. "Young master, I apologize for what happened just now. If you want to buy anything, I'll give you a half price as an apology." Lan Ting said in a deep voice and was very sincere. The surrounding people were dumbfounded. They had no idea what was going on. Nietian provoked the bright sea commerce. Not only did Lan Ting not settle the score with him, but he also apologized. Everyone couldn't understand this. In that case, I want some 3 lives grass. Is that okay? Nietian smiled faintly and said directly, he came for the 3 lives grass. Of course, he wouldn't be polite. Chapter 1098. The moment Lan Ting appeared, Nietian noticed him. Lan Ting was an alchemist, and his level was not low, a 7th-tier alchemist. He inferred from Nietian's eyes that Nietian was also an alchemist. When he wanted to sense Nietian's mental strength, he discovered that the latter's mental strength was far higher than his. This surprise was not small. It made him immediately realize that Nietian's status was very high and he could not afford to offend him. He could only roughly infer that Nietian was very likely to be an 8th-tier alchemist. A 20-year-old 8th-tier alchemist. Most likely only alchemists at the level of the 7 great elders could nurture. So in an instant, Lan Ting concluded that Nietian was a disciple of the Alchemist Guild's 7 great elders. After confirming this point, how could he still dare to offend Nietian? It was no exaggeration to say that the entire bright sea commerce could not compare to an Alchemist Guild's elder. But he guessed wrong. Nietian was not a disciple of the 7 great elders. He was once one of the 7 great elders. 3 lives grass. At this time, hearing Nietian's words, everyone present was stunned. This guy was actually here to buy 3 lives grass. Was there need to make such a big fuss? Young master, let's talk inside. Lan Ting was stunned at first, but then he said with a smile. Nietian nodded slightly and walked into the inner hall with Lan Ting, letting Imo, Rushi, and Cher wait for him in the hall. Those commerce guards were dumbfounded. It was their first time seeing Lan Ting so polite to someone. They were all guessing in their hearts what identity Nietian had. Young master Nya, I'm afraid what you want is not ordinary 3 lives grass, right? In the room, Lan Ting picked up a cup of tea, took a sip, and said faintly. Since he knew that Nietian's identity was extraordinary, he of course understood that what Nietian wanted was not ordinary 3 lives grass. Nietian did not stand on ceremony either. He nodded and said, I came to Dongchuan Divine Territory this time for the extraordinary 3 lives grass. I heard that your Chamber of Commerce has an even older 3 lives grass, right? As expected, Lan Ting's eyes flashed. It was not a secret that Bright Sea Merchant Association had 3 life grass that was more than 100 years old. However, not many people knew about this unless they deliberately asked around. Judging from Nietian's tone, he wasn't someone from the East River Celestial Territory, so he had come specifically for the 3 lives grass. Lan Ting picked up the teacup again and asked with a calm expression, May I know what year of 3 lives grass young master Nya wants? More than 10,000 years. Nietian didn't hide anything and said directly, Pooh! Lan Ting spat out a mouthful of tea the moment it reached his mouth. He could no longer conceal the shock in his heart as he let out a strange cry. More than 10,000 years? If he did not know that Nietian was an alchemist in advance, he would definitely think that the person in front of him was a fool. In this world, how could there be a 3 lives grass that was more than 10,000 years old? However, Nietian had a serious look on his face. He wasn't joking at all. Young Master Nya, where did you hear about the 3 lives grass that was more than 10,000 years old? After being stunned for a few seconds, Lan Ting finally regained his composure and asked with an embarrassed expression. Bright Sea Merchant Association had 3 lives grass that was more than 100 years old, but they didn't have any that were more than 10,000 years old. They didn't even have any that were more than 1,000 years old. He really didn't know if Nietian was messing with him, directly saying that it was more than 10,000 years old. Nietian saw that Lan Ting didn't seem to be pretending and immediately understood that Bright Sea Merchant Association didn't have the 10,000 years old 3 lives grass that he wanted. Thus he smiled and said, To be honest, I saw it in an ancient book. An ancient book? Lan Ting was stunned and had a speechless expression. At this moment, he was even more certain that Nietian was definitely a disciple of an elder. Those elders like to collect ancient books. For Nietian to have the chance to come into contact with these ancient books, it was even more clear of his identity. President Lon, I want to know where the 3 lives grass that is more than 100 years old in your merchant association comes from? At this moment, Nye Tian had a puzzled expression as he asked. Lon Ting's eyes flickered for a moment. Then he laughed and said, Young Master Nye, the source of the medicinal herb is the merchant association's secret. It can't be revealed to anyone. This is our merchant association's rule. I can't speak carelessly. Nye Tian's gaze slightly froze, and he seemed to be a little disappointed. Actually, the most important reason why he came to Bright Sea Merchant Association was to find out where the 3 lives grass that was more than 100 years old came from. Although Chun Genie had already told him that the 3 lives grass was an infinite wasteland immortal world was so big. If he were to search for it himself, who knew how long he would have to search for it? However, Lon Ting wasn't willing to reveal the source of the 3 lives grass, so he couldn't force him. Young Master Nye, do you really want to know where the 3 lives grass comes from? Seeing Nye Tian's disappointed face, Lon Ting suddenly spoke with a hint of slyness in his eyes. He could tell that Nye Tian's alchemy Dao talent was terrifyingly shocking. In the future, it was extremely possible for him to become one of the new 7 great elders, or even the president of the Alchemist Association. Now that Nye Tian had something to ask of him, Lon Ting wasn't willing to miss such a chance to befriend a big shot. Of course I want to know. How astute was Nye Tian? He immediately understood Lon Ting's meaning. He pretended to be very excited and said, As long as President Lon is willing to tell me, I will definitely remember President Lan's kindness and never forget it in this lifetime. When Lon Ting heard Nye Tian say the words, never forget it in this lifetime, his eyes shone with a burning passion and his entire person was about to float. Imagine, the future president of the Alchemist Association owed him such a great kindness. How exciting was this? Lon Ting seemed to see a bright path appearing in front of him. Infinite wasteland, immortal world, mysterious yellow mountain range. Almost without hesitation, Lon Ting set a location. Sure enough, it's infinite wasteland, immortal world. Nye Tian's gaze trembled slightly, and his face was incomparably happy. The infinite wasteland, immortal world was very big, but the mysterious yellow mountain range was not big. In this way, it would be much easier for him to find the 10,000-year-old 3 lives grass. Thank you for telling me, President Lon. I will never forget this kindness. Nye Tian smiled faintly and emphasized again. He was not being polite at this time, but he was really grateful to Lon Ting. Although the latter was expecting him to repay him, he had helped him after all. President, at this time, a panicked voice suddenly sounded, following which a figure rushed in and barged into the room. Bastard, don't you know how to knock? Lon Ting was originally drinking tea, but being interrupted, he spat it out again. His face could not help but turn cold as he reprimanded. That person was full of panic and said, President, it's not good. The Lone Eagle Castle's people are fighting with those 2 girls. And Lon Ting was stunned and did not react for a moment. Rushi, Shui, Nye Tian snapped out of his daze. He sprang to his feet and dashed out of the hall. In the Bright Sea Chamber of Commerce's hall, more than a dozen martial artists surrounded Mo Rushi and Cher. The person leading them was the Lone Eagle Castle's 3rd elder, Wang Chongfeng. Beside Wang Chongfeng stood the 2 finely dressed young men who were glaring viciously at Mo Rushi and Shui. Mo Rushi protected Cher behind her, her eyes firm and murderous. Chapter 1099. Go to hell. As the young man's sinister voice fell, his entire body released a murderous intent, and he directly struck out with his palm. A powerful palm energy pressed down like a raging wave, rolling like a mountain. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air at the sight of this. Some of them couldn't bear to watch any longer. Mo Rushi and Shui were both peerless beauties, and it was truly a pity for them to die like this. You're the one who's going to die. Mo Rushi's eyes were indifferent. She stepped into the air and rushed towards the palm energy. In an instant, a pair of phoenix wings appeared behind her, and when they spread out, they were hundreds of meters long, and the entire hall immediately turned fiery red. Boom! Immediately, a crimson flame fell from the sky, directly destroying the palm energy, and pressed down on the young man. Ah! That person let out a blood-curdling scream when he felt a terrifying blazing attack. He didn't even have the time to react before his body was engulfed by the flames and turned into a pile of ash. At almost the same time, Wang Chongfeng suddenly struck out with his palm, and a huge hurricane appeared in the void, like a tornado, and the entire hall suddenly shook. Whoosh! The hurricane whistled out like a long snake, tearing the void, and attacked Mo Rushi. Mo Rushi's beautiful eyes flickered in midair, and she wanted to react, but it was too late. Who dares to hurt her? At the critical moment, a roar sounded, and then a majestic sword intent blasted out. The terrifying sword's shadow hit the hurricane, and the hurricane was torn apart. Swish! But the wind blade formed by the hurricane still cut Mo Rushi, and a wound appeared on her arm, and blood flowed out. Nie Tian's figure appeared in the air, and he directly hugged Mo Rushi and landed on the ground. Seeing the wound on her shoulder, he looked nervous and asked, "Rushi, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Mo Rushi endured the pain, but her expression was very strange. This kind of wound was nothing to her, and should have healed in an instant. She was a heavenly emperor, and she had the power of the Nirvana Saint Heart in her body. Her martial body was far stronger than ordinary heavenly emperors, so why couldn't this small wound heal? Nie Tian also noticed this and immediately understood that it must be the will of the sage's imprint that prevented Mo Rushi's Nirvana true meaning and Nirvana Sacred Heart from unleashing their recovery power. "Sister Rushi, are you all right?" At this time, Cher screamed and ran over. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red. She was about to cry. Just as Cher ran over, a strange scene happened. The wound on Mo Rushi's shoulder actually healed in an instant. Huh? Mo Rushi was stunned and looked at Cher in surprise. She had no idea what was going on. Nie Tian, on the other hand, understood everything. When Cher was by Mo Rushi's side, she was able to suppress the saint's imprint in the latter's body. With the true will of heaven's divination and the Nirvana Sacred Heart working together, the wound would naturally heal. However, Mo Rushi did not know that there was a saint's mark in her body, so she could only look at Cher with a strange expression. At this time, the crowd reacted and sucked in a breath of cold air. They looked at Mo Rushi in shock, and their hearts were shocked to the extreme. Everyone thought that Mo Rushi would definitely die from that palm strike. Who would have thought that the result would be the exact opposite? Mo Rushi had killed the young man in luxurious clothes in one move. However, the Lone Eagle Castle's third elder, Wang Chongfeng, was too despicable. He actually sneak attacked Mo Rushi and nearly seriously injured her. If not for Nie Tian's timely arrival, Mo Rushi would have been seriously injured even if she did not die from Wang Chongfeng's attack. Without Cher by her side, Mo Rushi was obviously suppressed by the saint's imprint, and her martial body was very weak. "Brat, you really are here." When Wang Chongfeng saw Nie Tian appear, his eyes revealed a vicious light, and he said in a cold tone, "Don't you know that little lonely city is my Lone Eagle Castle's territory? Since you came here, don't even think about leaving alive." "Is that so?" Nie Tian's eyes were as cold as ice, and he signaled Mo Rushi and Cher to retreat. Since Wang Chongfeng had attacked Mo Rushi just now, he would definitely not let the latter go. Everyone from the Lone Eagle Castle present had to die. "Wang Chongfeng, how dare you?" In the next moment, an angry voice sounded, and Lan Ting's figure appeared. He stared coldly at Wang Chongfeng and growled, "You actually dare to make a move in my Bright Sea Trade Association. You're courting death." As the last two words fell, Lan Ting's entire body's aura was released, and the people from the Lone Eagle Castle were forced to retreat. When Wang Chongfeng saw Lan Ting appear, his eyes trembled slightly, and his expression was a little embarrassed. He said, "President Lan, it's not that I want to make a move in the Bright Sea Trade Association, but this silver-haired brat and the two girls beside him killed people from our Lone Eagle Castle. As an elder of a Lone Eagle Castle, if I don't kill them, how can I convince my subordinates? You want to kill them? Lan Ting's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he said, What if they're my friends? As soon as Lan Ting's words fell, everyone's eyes trembled violently. His words were very obvious. He wanted to protect Nie Tian and the other two. And Wang Changfeng was suddenly stunned, but then he smiled sinisterly and said, President Lan, don't joke around. The three of them are martial artists from the Meru world just now. How can they be your friends? People from the Meru world? Hearing Wang Changfeng's words, everyone was stunned again. They looked at Nie Tian and the other two in surprise, and the shock in their eyes intensified. It was very obvious that everyone present did not believe Wang Changfeng's words. How could a martial artist from the Meru world kill a Heavenly Emperor realm martial artist in one move? Wasn't this a joke? Wang Changfeng, do you think this president is a 3-year-old child? Lan Ting's gaze was also cold as he said directly, I said that Mr. Nie is my friend, so he is my friend. Furthermore, I'm telling you clearly that I want to protect Mr. Nie and his friends. Lan Ting did not believe Wang Changfeng's words at all. If someone said that a Meru world martial artist could break through the plane's restriction and reach Heavenly Emperor realm strength, then Lan Ting could still believe it. But if someone said that a Meru world martial artist could grow to become a Tier 8 alchemist at the age of 20, Lan Ting would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. Lan Ting's words made the scene stunned again, directly falling into a dead silence. These words could not be clearer. If Wang Changfeng wanted to make a move, Lan Ting would accompany him to the end. Nie Tian was also stunned for a moment at this time. He did not expect that Lan Ting would actually protect him so resolutely. Wang Changfeng's gaze trembled violently, clearly thinking about something. It was true that Little Lonely City was the Lone Eagle Castle's territory, but the Lone Eagle Castle was just a third-rate force in East River Divine Realm. It was considered a local tyrant. But the Bright Sea Trade Association was different. This was just a branch of the trade association, but there was a behemoth-like force behind it. Forget that the Lone Eagle Castle was a third-rate force. Even a first-rate force did not dare to offend it. At this moment, Wang Changfeng had the intention to retreat. President Lan. But right at this time, a whimpering voice suddenly sounded out. Following that, a figure in black descended. His hawk-like gaze landed on Lan Ting as he said cold, You'd better not intervene in this matter. This silver-haired brat is dead for sure. Chapter 1100. Solitary Eagle Castle Lord. When the crowd heard Lan Ting's voice, they all looked at the black-clothed cultivator who had suddenly arrived. Their eyes revealed unconcealable fear. Solitary Eagle Stronghold's Lord Ing Du was known as Little Solitary City's #1 expert. Just like his name, he was vicious and merciless. It was said that when he was unhappy, he would even kill his own wife and children, not to mention his subordinates. The people of Lone Eagle Castle feared hawk venom like a demon, and the people of Lonely City saw him as a murderous demon. No one in Lonely City dared to go against his wishes. Solitary Eagle Castle's castle master. At this moment, Nie Tian's gaze couldn't help but fall on Ing Du. The latter had a thin face and a cold gaze, giving off an extremely sinister feeling. With a single glance, one could tell that he was the kind of ruthless person who would do things by hook or by crook. What surprised Nie Tian even more was that Hawk Poison's strength was actually 3rd-level Heavenly Emperor. Even Lan Ting only had 2nd-level Heavenly Emperor strength. Hawk Poison's strength was actually stronger than Lan Ting's. No wonder he was so insolent. At this moment, Ing Du's gaze was locked onto Nie Tian. The murderous intent in his eyes was terrifying. Such a cold, killing intent. Nie Tian's gaze couldn't help but turn serious. It seemed that Ing Du had just arrived at the Bright Sea Merchant Guild and didn't know what had happened before. Why did he have such a strong, killing intent towards him? Castle Lord. Seeing the Eagle Poison arrive, Wang Changfeng had a look of joy on his face. He was also very surprised that the Eagle Poison would actually appear here. Before he could report to the Hawk Poison about Nie Tian, The latter had suddenly arrived, and his entire body's killing intent was locked onto Nyetian, as if he had specially come to kill Nyetian. Is there any resentment between Castle Lord and this brat? Wang Changfeng wondered. Nyetian. Eagle's venomous eyes locked onto Nyetian. He opened his mouth cold and directly said Nyetian's name. A chilling voice resounded in the hall, and everyone could feel the cold, murderous intent rushing towards them. Looks like you came here specifically to kill me. No matter how stupid Nyetian was, he understood that Ingdu must have been instructed by someone to come here to kill him. However, Nyetian and the others had just arrived at the Sumer world. How did Eagle Poison know that they were here? It was very strange. You're not too stupid. At least you can understand why you're dying. Ingdu smiled cold, the viciousness in his eyes becoming even stronger. Eagle Bane. Meanwhile, Lan Ting suddenly roared furiously and said in a deep voice, "You're too arrogant." Although this was a small, lonely city, it was also bright sea commerce. I've already said that Mr. Nyetian is my friend. Do you still want to kill him? The thunderous voice fell, and the hall fell into a brief silence. Although Hawk Poison's strength was tyrannical, he could not help but fear the enormous power behind Lan Ting. Bright sea commerce, even 1,000 lone eagle fortresses could not afford to offend it. Oomph. After a while, the short silence was broken by Ingdu's cold laughter. Ingdu's cold eyes swept across Lan Ting, and without the slightest bit of fear, he said, "Lan Ting, looks like you didn't listen to what I said just now. I'll tell you again, don't interfere in this matter. The person who asked me to do this, even Lord Dong Ming Hai, cannot afford to offend him. If you dare to interfere, you will bring disaster to the entire Bright Sea Commerce." Dong Ming Hai was the president of the Bright Sea Commerce, and also the founder of the Bright Sea Commerce. He was an extremely powerful expert in the entire Heaven Realm. Ingdu's sudden mention of this name caused the hearts of everyone present to tremble. At this time, everyone could vaguely feel that this matter might not be as simple as it seemed on the surface. "Ingdu, what do you mean by that?" Lan Ting was also stunned for a moment. Although his tone was still unyielding, his eyes were no longer as firm. He could tell that Ingdu was definitely not bluffing. Maybe Nyetian had really offended some super big shot, which was why Ingdu had come to kill him. Also, Ingdu said that the person who asked him to do this was someone that even Dong Ming Hai couldn't afford to offend. Who could this person be? Alchemist Guild Elder? The peak of the Heaven Realm, Sword Dao? Or could it be the 9 emperors of the Heaven Realm? Thinking of this, Lan Ting's forehead was covered in sweat. Ingdu risked offending the Bright Sea Commerce to kill Nyetian. How could this matter be so simple? At this moment, Lan Ting was afraid and wanted to retreat. He was not some big shot. If he were to get involved in this mess, he would probably not even be able to find any dregs. "Lan Ting, you're a smart person. It's not too late to back out now." Ingdu smiled coldly. The ruthlessness in his eyes intensified as he threatened Lan Ting unabashedly. Lan Ting's expression was slightly ugly as he turned to look at Nyetian. "President Lan, this is my own matter. You don't need to interfere." At this time, Nyetian took a step forward, his face indifferent, without the slightest bit of panic. He had already confirmed that Ingdu was definitely someone arranged by Luo Chenhun. Even if it was not personally instructed by Luo Chenhun, it must have been instructed by his subordinates. Nyetian found it very strange. He had just arrived at the Heaven Realm Divine Domain, but Luo Chenhun actually knew where he was. This was too strange. Seeing Nyetian speak like this, Lan Ting could not help but feel ashamed. He had read countless people and could tell that Nyetian was a sincere person who was worth befriending. "President Lan, I would like to trouble you to take care of the 2 ladies beside me, just for a while." At this time, Nyetian's voice sounded again. As he spoke, his cold eyes were already locked onto Ingdu. There would be a huge battle between him and Ingdu, and he did not want the people of the Lone Eagle Castle to make a move on Mo Rushi and share during this period. "All right." Lan Ting did not hesitate and nodded heavily. "Rest assured, Mr. Nya, as long as I am here, I will not let anyone harm the 2 ladies." Although Lan Ting did not dare to openly interfere with Nyetian's matters, he could protect Mo Rushi and share. Ingdu glanced at Lan Ting, then looked at Nie Tian and said cold, "Those two girls are not my target. I only want to kill you." Ingdu's order was to kill Nie Tian, and he did not care about anyone else. "All right, then let us fight to the death." Nie Tian smiled faintly. His figure moved, and he directly appeared outside the hall. Ingdu's figure flickered, and he followed closely behind Nie Tian. The two figures directly rushed out of the hall and stood tall in the sky, facing each other. The others all came outside the hall, looking at the two figures high above in the sky. Their gazes involuntarily started trembling, guessing the battle situation in their hearts one after another. Nie Tian only had first-level Heavenly Emperor strength, while Ingdu was third-level Heavenly Emperor strength. The disparity in strength between the two people seemed like this battle would end very quickly, and the winner would definitely be Ingdu. "Mr. Nie, do you really have the strength to fight with Ingdu?" Lan Ting looked at Nie Tian and Ingdu, his face revealing doubt. Earlier, Nie Tian made him protect Mo Rushi and share, saying that it would be done in a while. It seemed like he had full confidence in this battle. Lan Ting could also sense the terrifying confidence in Nie Tian's eyes. It seemed like the latter did not place Ingdu in his sights at all.